Chapter 2387. This is your Imperial Thunder Sect business. You don't need to tell me. Li Zongbao said without opening his eyes. I've consumed a lot of magic power and need to adjust my breathing. You can finish the rest. Yes. Xiao Hua saw that Li Zongbao's complexion was still pale gold and knew that he hadn't recovered yet. Thus, he agreed and took out the suppressing cloud seal. He smashed a large hole in the ground nearby and threw the corpses of dozens of beast cultivators into it. Then, he buried them. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to take the beast cultivators' storage pouches and demonic tools. As for the Imperial Thunder Sect disciples' corpses, although Li Zongbao had already cleaned them up, they were still too horrible to look at. Xiao Hua clenched his teeth and closed his eyes. He put the male and female disciples' corpses into 2 storage pouches. As for their belongings, Xiao Hua cleaned them up and put them into another storage pouch. When everything was done, Xiao Hua glanced at Li Zongbao, who was meditating. He took out the jade slips and other items from the Lightning Converting Palace's Foundation Establishment disciples and looked through them. Then he took out 2 of them. One of the 2 jade slips had a restriction, and it was a restriction unique to the Imperial Thunder Sect. Although Xiao Hua hadn't touched it before, the faint flash of lightning was enough to show that if he wasn't sure he could break it, it was better not to touch it. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and put away the jade slip. He looked at the other one again. After a long time, Xiao Hua's brows unconsciously furrowed. He raised his eyes and looked in a direction in the distance. He seemed to have thought of something. After a long while, Xiao Hua put away the jade slip. He patted his hand and took out a Reliance Lotus pill from the Imperial Thunder Sect disciple storage pouch. He put it in his mouth and closed his eyes to ponder. These Imperial Thunder Sect disciples came from the Imperial Thunder Sect. According to the jade slip, a cultivator named Gui Miaoqing sent a distress message to the Imperial Thunder Sect Palace Master Guigia. Xiao Hua knew that Li Zongbao didn't mention the location, but his situation was very different. I'm afraid this message is very important. If this was applied to and needs to be spoken by a dead Imperial Thunder Sect disciple. Seeing that Xiao Hua didn't take it seriously, is in this restricted Li Zongbao didn't say anything. It's fine if I'm not a disciple. He still released his divine sense to observe the direction they were going. Then, after the flowing cloud, if I can't, then I don't have to worry about the jade slip being destroyed. The surroundings but since we have to send the news of these although Century City was located in the north, we have to take the items back. Unusually cold, and this all kinds of colorful snow scenery were pleasing to the eye. I wonder if Marshal Uncle still not comparable to the world of glaciers here. Should I return to Century City now? And the sky has cleared up to Marshal the usual gloomy sky of Century City. White clouds. I'm afraid I don't have to go back directly. And the sky was so blue she asked that the Foundation Establishment Stage disciples to go back just by looking at it. She shouldn't be in danger right now, and maybe she's trapped in some kind of magic formation under the clear blue sky. She's waiting for the Imperial Thunder School. Everything was made of ice and help, and ordinary snow was a rare sight. Her disciples were all killed by beast other than the occasional if she hadn't run into me that could be seen, would have known that she was trapped here. There was nothing else that had anything to do with vegetation. Let's wait for Li Zongbao. Although there was a faint layer of his brilliance outside before we asked for his opinion. It was used to defend this young master's cultivation. Is a little too fast. It was also covered with a layer of sparkling Xiao Hua began to worry about his own affairs. As a thumb. When I was in the Imperial Thunder layer was transparent, I just reached the late stage of Foundation establishment stage. After clearing the first layer, to my cultivation Xiao Hua ignored it. I'm afraid it will take decades, had always been unafraid, or even hundreds of years. But here, reach the peak even the breath they exhaled with a little bit of ice, which made Xiao Hua. I didn't even think of preparing to condense. Looking at Li Zongbao now, after he was sitting casually on the flying boat, I rushed to the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment stage within 5 years. Which should also be in this environment. It seems that I can condense cultivation anytime. Although Xiao Hua found that Li Zongbao had been traveling the elixir. Xiao Hua didn't these 2 elixirs. Xiao Hua was not taught to condensing the elixir. He didn't care about other people's to solidify the especially the privacy and produced the golden elixir. Li Zongbao was practicing different cultivation. The other treasure mirrors. They're all cultivators. Expression became golden elixir as cultivators. Others have started. Why are they so when they were in the late stage? Still didn't. Li Zongbao's words shot. But I was 2 of them were almost the same. Xiao Hua heard. How can I have a chance? He was deeply moved. Damn it! And these 2 elixir special understanding. I met the twin females change a lot of Zongbao countries. But there's none of my story. Stood up. Even if I want to refine it myself. Oh, wasn't seeing your brother also bright thinking those two females squinted very Zongbao, and they're far from comparable. We've already entered the late stage of foundation. If there's no war, they're all this guy is the swordsman of the Li Zongbao country survive. If there's a war, they're all. I don't know if there's no matter if it's their willpower. We look at however cultivators. This thought is stronger. Cultivators look at us. Cultivators also specialize in instant blows to the middle side thought of killing and that you want. That's why there's two directly loving Zongbao higher cultivator power than us cultivators. Although Xiao Li Zongbao settings differently. As he sympathized with them, admittedly rapidly condensing. Well, on the but the big one ended up being a Li Zongbao. Indeed, however, seeing that Li's situation at that time was dangerous. After all, there was no need for the toughness of the physical body, and he and perhaps the evil is in this war. Didn't really have in the cultivators. He didn't dare. I've obtained a Xiao the truth inside to temper my body. If there's a chance, although I can't get it, I still want to see if I can distinguish. I'm still much stronger than ordinary cultivators. There's no need to hide any, even if they transformed. That's God's will. Li Zongbao did see interest them to stay together. But if it's not in his sight, he first looked outside the boat with his hand. I only hope that after he returned to look at Xiao Hua, I can quickly return to Sky. Actually, that's not what I'm talking about. I can go to EG. I'm thinking that since the Huan elixir, it's really despicable. But these Zongbao really cultivators a lot of serious power. After we cultivators can also come with such a thing. He got up, especially those with water originally ice types that only when beast cultivators and demon beasts cultivated junior brother Xiao. There would be a change in their mentality, everything, and so on. Only then would they commit Xiao Hua heard. He didn't expect that cultivators could also do such a thing. Senior brother, senior sister, humans and beasts. I've collected some aspects. When I meet the female disciples, Li Zongbao didn't explain to arrange them carefully. That's right. I've also collected the token and other things in another storage. Didn't they also commit? You don't have to say it in such detail. Female cultivators. Li Zongbao wave his hand. If cultivators still the same old saying, it would also be. This is your imperial thunder sect. Unfortunately, I won't. We're only foundation. Moreover, if there's anything in your sect, although our hearts are big, I won't restrict our strength. You can go wherever you want. It's already not bad that we're able to keep ourselves safe in this. But when he heard Li Zongbao looked at the spotlessly white ground in the mountains. However, the twin female swordsman you mentioned, and see if there are other Imperial Thunder Sect disciples in front. If we can find them, there are, or find out where ask them to send a message back. If we can prove that they have nothing to do with the Tao Sect, I don't have to go there personally. The sword cultivators won't have an excuse wave his hand and say, "And this war will." Today I was a little careless. Xiao Hua also smiled bitterly. I can only run about this. If you really want to leave, that Zhang Yutong and Zhang Yuha, without your cooperation, more than 1 or 2 it's really not easy. They disappeared when Xiao Hua was at the beginning of the 12th apologetically. Brotherly, you're too modest. That Xiao Hua I just took advantage of the late stage. I don't have much spiritual power. They still, in my opinion, senior brothers. Moreover, if they could be found, the 3 kingdoms of cultivation would have found them long ago. It consumes a lot of spiritual power. Why wait until now? And its power, the Gale Snowfield, definitely is more than that. Li Zongbao's figure flew up. Seeing that Xiao Hua was also slowly following behind with the speed of the flowing cloud appeared on the corner of his mouth. We'll be there in 2 days. Xiao Hua, where did Senior Brother Li get the news? Very good. This place is so far away from the Sky said you're outstanding. Who would know that spiritual power come here is very strong. Xiao Hua asked, although you're only in the middle stage of foundation establishment, smiled mysteriously. Your control of the cloud suppressing seal. This news was revealed by far from what I can do. In fact, I even feel that your magical power even more puzzled. Is not inferior to that of a Chapter 2389. Of course not. That Xiao Hua said things too highly without waiting for Xiao Hua in these past few years. Li Zongbao often released some specious news to lure our Tao Sect cultivators. It's good that you're humble, and then I'm also ambush them. After those disciples, there's always someone know the immensity of heaven and earth to one's heart is the foundation. They clearly know that it's inappropriate. But sometimes they still fall into the trap. If you're too humble, it's as if they think that only they can see through the traps. When you show your strength, the benefits you get are also far beyond hiding it. And this news was obtained from one of the elders on duty at the assembly hall. You don't dare to take it out, so that's how it is. I'm afraid it's because of the reward. Let's not talk so much. Mansions. This is your own assembly hall. Even if I see it, I won't say anything criticizing Li Zongbao. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. What was the difference spiritual between power Zongbao's deeper day by day and those disciples who don't know the immensity to be exposed with his every move? After flying for another half a day, not to mention the other mountains and rivers below, just the pure cultivation of a Taoist sect meant that he might have to face ice lakes, unknown and continuous glaciers began to appear. Above the ice lakes, be careful. The ice Xiao Hua took out the flowing cloud, abnormally sparkling, and invited Li Zongbao It was like a huge mirror. He smiled apologetically,
the bright
sunlight.
Thank you
for your
teachings.
And the glaciers were like jade ribbons that coiled around the ice plains. Please point out the direction. It was a spectacular sight. Li Zongbao regained his indifferent expression. There was a faint mist pointing out the direction half of the sky. He said, "That's where the glaciers is geothermal energy. This divine whip of mine, seeing Xiao famous magic weapon of my Zongbao explained." As it used to be used by a nascent soul grandmaster in Yang and Yin. Because of my reputation, Yang have always been bestowed it to me in this extremely cold foundation establishment stage. There will often be geothermal energy times rising from the ground, giving birth to a kind of hot spring. I think that water of my current cultivation is warm. I can only use less even in extremely cold places of this magic weapon's power. It's completely different from the cold of the glaciers. Xiao Hua's eyes widened. It's a strange scene, and he was very shocked. After you and I killed Qin Jian, saying that it's 10%. Take a look. Is just me boasting. Haha, very good. Li Zongbao smiled bitterly. But in an instant, I personally saw that nascent soul grandmaster, as if there was some reaction from with just a whip shadow. There's Yang and Yin, and the earth split. Yin and Yang. A mountain peak. These words sound very familiar. By this, it seems to be related to something. That's right. But when he thought about it carefully, suddenly saw the scene in front of Chicken Crow Mountain. He was completely the scene of the old man waving his flying sword and slicing from the hand of mountain peak. It must be very important. Ever since Xiao Hua experienced, I've encountered two nascent soul cultivators. He knew the crux of the matter. He already understood that everything in this world nascent soul cultivator. If he could control Black Forest, then he would be able to avoid Jing Si. If he could avoid karma for several years, then he would be able to escape from the mortal world. I didn't give them a chance. This was extremely useful for his definitely wouldn't have been able to escape. Therefore, it seems that my suppressing cloud seal anything and soaring dragon scissors are not enough to resist of nascent soul cultivators. Is the karma that I sensed in the great formation Xiao Hua thought of the overturning sea seal. If that's the case, then we still have to make a trip to the if he could obtain the refinement method, seeing that Xiao Hua was deep in thought again, or even a complete overturning sea seal, bewildered. It might be much thinking for a moment. Suppressing he didn't know what he had said to Xiao Hua. Sometimes, revealing one's strength and close his eyes to regulate his breathing may not be a bad. In 2 days, Li Zongbao didn't know how Xiao Hua was a sword cultivator with a fierce reputation. He only casually said, didn't have your Imperial Thunder Sect and might not be able to compare to Xiao Hua thought for a moment. But if he can take out one or two magic weapons, seeing that Li Zongbao had closed his eyes again, it will be extremely easy. Instead, it will be much better. He urged the flowing cloud flying ship to continue moving forward. At the same time, he took out the Jade Talisman Refinement Manual from the Huang family of Tianmen Mountain and reviewed it again. Xiao Hua had already tried to comprehend this elementary and somewhat incomplete Jade Talisman back when he was at Tianmen Mountain. Unfortunately, he didn't have any jade essences for him to practice on. Now that he had a lot of jade essences in his space, how could he not take out the matter of refining jade talismans? 2 days passed quickly. Xiao Hua scanned the area with his divine sense, but couldn't see a single person. He couldn't help but ask, "Senior Brother Li, is this the Gale Snowfield? Where are those disciples lying in ambush?" "I don't know either," Li Zongbao said softly. "Just fly slowly. You'll see them eventually." You don't know?" Xiao Hua was astonished. "Of course I don't know," Li Zongbao said matter-of-factly. "However, the Gale Snowfield is only 10,000 li in size. If those disciples were to fight with Qin Jian, I'll definitely see them. You just have to look for them slowly, okay?" So it's the legendary waiting for rabbits. Xiao Hua understood. He had no choice but to activate the flying boat again and fly aimlessly above the glacier. He also released his divine sense and kept searching. On the Gale Snowfield, above a square ice lake, the sun was shining brightly. The pale, white sunlight scattered weakly on the surface of the lake. The mirror-like ice layer reflected the light to a protrusion on a mountain peak not far away. That protrusion was also a layer of ice. It was astonishingly thick. The light passed through the ice layer and gathered on the ground at the foot of the mountain. After the light gathered, it was so hot that it was far hotter than the heat from the sky. In just a moment, water vapor rose from the ice and snow at the foot of the mountain. As the sun moved in the sky, the water vapor also moved like an earthworm. Phew, just as the earthworm moved to the side of stone, a light flashed frequently. After a yellow light was annihilated, a tall, middle-aged man appeared in the light. The middle-aged man's face was filled with confusion. He patted his hand and took out a talisman from his body. It was the rare invisibility talisman in the Dawn Rain continent. Strange. The middle-aged man looked left and right as if he was looking for something. When his gaze landed on the water vapor, he patted his forehead and laughed. Damn it. So, it's this. I actually encountered such a miraculous thing. Then, the middle-aged man raised his head and looked at another place not far away. He shouted, Senior Brother Qian, Quan Jie, what are you doing? Why aren't you hiding yourself quickly? If Qin Jian sees you, won't our ambush fail? A slightly impatient voice sounded from the direction Quan Jie was looking at. Tisk, Quan Jie snorted and sat down disapprovingly. He patted his hand and took out a white spiritual fruit from the storage bag at his waist. He took a bite, and a milky white juice seeped out of the spiritual fruit and flowed into Quan Jie's mouth. This has been hidden for 10 days, and not a single sword cultivator came. I'm afraid this news didn't even reach the sword cultivator's ears. Or maybe Qin Jian didn't even want to accept our challenge. Why do you still have this milky rain fruit? Senior Brother Qian was surprised. Then, with a flash of light, a short cultivator with a dark and thin face appeared. Hee, I took this from the sword cultivator's storage bag. Quan Jie replied with a smile. He patted his hand, and another milky rain fruit was thrown to Senior Brother Qian. Oh, that swordswoman who gestated her sword? Senior Brother Qian was surprised. He caught the milky rain fruit and took a bite. Then he smiled lewdly. This taste is similar to that swordswoman's. Yes, it's that swordswoman's. Quan Jie was also reminiscing. I didn't expect that a swordswoman who gestated her sword would have so many good things in her storage bag. Tisk tisk, Senior Brother Qian smacked his lips and said, It's a pity for that swordswoman. What's there to pity? In this war, there are many swordswomen like her. You can find as many as you want. Are you afraid that you can't find her? Senior Brother Qian seemed to have thought of something. He stretched out his index finger and gestured for Quan Jie to keep quiet. Then he said softly, It's enough for you and me to know about this. There are many cultivators lying in ambush in the Gale snowfield today. If news of this spreads to the sect, it will be disadvantageous to both of us. I understand. Quan Jie smiled lewdly and said, Those are just entertainment for us during the war. Killing Qin Jian is the most important thing. If you and I were to kill Qin Jian and obtain the reward from the discussion hall, we will definitely be rewarded when we return to our sect. Not to mention our future path of cultivation. Even our junior sisters will be impressed by us. What is this female swordsman worth? It's just that. Senior Qian lifted his head to look at the sky and said worriedly, just as Junior Quan said, we don't know if Qin Jian has received the challenge. If he doesn't come, wouldn't our formation be useless? Why don't we release my spiritual bird? Quan Jie thought for a while and asked softly. Senior Brother Qian shook his head slightly. This is the Huan Kingdom. The bird cultivators of the Huan Kingdom are very powerful. Their spirit beasts are much more powerful than those of the Black Spirit sect. If some of the bird cultivators are in the Gale snowfield, won't they discover the spiritual bird immediately? If that's the case, our location will be exposed. Then we can't just wait like this. Quan Jie smacked his lips and smiled apologetically. After waiting for so long, why don't we go somewhere else and see if there are any swordsmen who are alone? All right, wait for a while. I will go and ask Pan Hao. Senior Brother Qian thought for a while and nodded. He turned and flew away softly. He is just a disciple of the Xuanyan school. Seeing that Senior Brother Qian had left, Quan Jie's lips curled up slightly. He seemed to be disdainful. If I had also entered the Xuanyan school, I would have already condensed my core. How can I be like him, who is only in the middle stage of foundation establishment? What is there to be proud of? If not for the fact that I have some use for him, he probably wouldn't even recognize me. As he said that, Quan Jie didn't dare to be careless. He put the milk rain fruit into his mouth and activated the invisibility talisman. He stuck it on his body and disappeared. Senior Brother Qian was Qian Feng. Like Quan Jie, he was also a disciple of the spirit husbandry sect. Hopefully, they were both at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment and were close to the middle stage of foundation establishment. The spirit husbandry sect was considered a small sect in the country of Shi, and there weren't many disciples participating in the war. Therefore, the two of them weren't sent to the Sky Patrol City. However, since the two of them participated in the encirclement of Chao Wu's soul in the Flame Forest Swamp decades ago and benefited from it, their cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds from the early stage of foundation establishment to the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. They coveted the middle stage of foundation establishment and knew that if they simply cultivated within the sect, they wouldn't have the chance to easily enter the middle stage of foundation establishment. If they wanted to improve further, they would have to be like the Flame Forest Swamp and obtain some opportunities. Chapter 2390. Coincidentally, the battle between Dao cultivators had begun. Although they were not selected, they came to the vicinity of Sky Patrol City in the name of training. In the beginning, the two of them were really apprehensive. However, when they arrived at the Sentry City on the battlefield, they realized that there were many cultivators like them who wanted to seek opportunities and take advantage of the situation. Not only did the council hall not blame them, it even gave them a lot of convenience. For example, the meeting hall offered a reward for killing Qin Jian. Regardless of whether the cultivators were participating in the battle or not, as long as they killed Qin Jian, the reward would be the same. Of course, the two of them did not plan to kill Qin Jian. They only carefully searched the vicinity of Sky Patrol City or the border of Huan Country for lone swordsmen. If they encountered a group of swordsmen, they would immediately escape. If they could not escape, they would send a signal for help to the Dao sect cultivators. In short, they had the intention of taking advantage of others. The two of them were also lucky. After several years of war, the two of them had obtained many benefits. Their cultivation had been improving, and they were much stronger than when they were in Spirit Husbandry sect. Therefore, the two of them became bolder and bolder. Half a year ago, the two of them met Pan Hao, a disciple of Xuanyan cult who was about to leave Sky Patrol City. Pan Hao had some old acquaintances with Qian Feng. The three of them chatted for a while, and Pan Hao invited the two of them to the Gale Snowfield. He said that someone had organized an ambush to kill Qin Jian and had issued a challenge to Qin Jian. He invited the two of them to participate. When Qian Feng and Quan Jie heard that they were going to ambush the illusory swordsmen, they shook their heads and flatly refused. However, Pan Hao explained in detail that the person who organized the ambush was a Golden Core cultivator, and there were more than 300 Dao sect cultivators participating in the ambush. They were tempted. What was more special was when Pan Hao explained that they only needed to use their spiritual birds to find out Qin Jian's whereabouts. They did not need to fight with Qin Jian. As long as they killed Qin Jian, they would be able to obtain credit and a reward. They could no longer suppress their desire and immediately agreed to work with Pan Hao. However, Pan Hao and the other Xuanyan school disciples had come to the Gale Snow Plains to reinforce a small spirit stone mine in Xuanyan school. This ambush was arranged for half a year later, and they did not follow Pan Hao and the other Xuanyan school disciples to the Gale Snow Plains. The two of them set off from Sky Patrol City alone and killed many sword-nurturing swordsmen along the way. Only then did they arrive here satisfied. But when he arrived here, Quan Jie discovered something wrong. The Gale Snowfield was simply too cold. His spirit bird could not stay in the air for too long. It could only fly outside for the time it took to brew a cup of tea before it had to turn back. Otherwise, it would be frozen to death. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, how high and how far could the spirit bird fly? As a result, Pan Hao and the others treated Quan Jie coldly again. They even vaguely mentioned that if Quan Jie and Qian Feng were of no use, even if they killed Qin Jian, they would not be able to obtain the reward they mentioned earlier. Quan Jie was naturally unhappy. Because of this, he almost fell out with Pan Hao. Therefore, when he saw Qian Feng looking for Pan Hao, Quan Jie showed disdain. After a while, Qian Feng turned back and sent a message to Quan Jie, asking him to release the spirit bird. When Quan Jie heard that, he had no choice but to reveal himself again. He took out a fiery red strange bird the size of a palm from the spirit storage bag on his right. The strange bird's head was triangular, like an earthworm's beak. A flesh pouch the size of a thumb hung in front of its chest. When it spread its fiery red wings, the feathers opened up, revealing the red bird skin under the feathers. Go, Quan Jie instructed in a low voice. The spirit bird circled in the air a few times and shot up into the sky like a sharp arrow. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared. Tsk Tisk, Qian Feng, who was beside him, revealed a tinge of envy in his eyes. He said in a low voice, Junior brother Quan, your spirit bird is getting more and more powerful. Back then, the soul was not used in vain. Senior brother Qian, didn't your Lian Bao also devour souls? Why are you envious of me? Quan Jie was secretly happy, but his face showed that he did not care. How can it be compared? Qian Feng smiled bitterly. I, Lian Bao, have not improved as fast as your little thing these years. Qian Feng still wanted to say more, but Quan Jie's face tightened, and he hurriedly looked up at the sky. Oh, there's news? Qian Feng immediately shut up and asked in a low voice. Quan Jie ignored him and only narrowed his eyes to look at the sky. After half a cup of tea's time, the spiritual bird once again fell from the sky. Its fiery red feathers were now covered with ice, and its triangular bird head was also trembling slightly. When it landed in Quan Jie's hand, Quan Jie only felt a wave of coldness. Quan Jie did not dare to delay and hurriedly put the spirit bird into the spirit storage bag. How is it? Qian Feng asked anxiously again. Well, Quan Jie hesitated slightly and sent a message. About 15 kilometers west of here, there are more than 10 sword cultivator disciples. Oh, sword cultivator disciples? More than 10? Qian Feng frowned. What are they doing? They're in a sorry state. Their sword armor is tattered, and they look nervous, as if they were defeated and fled. Quan Jie narrowed his eyes and said. Qian Feng's face instantly lit up with joy. According to his and Quan Jie's experience, these scattered disciples were the easiest to bully. As long as the two of them showed themselves, these disciples would definitely flee at the sight of them. They did not need to put on airs, and they only needed to focus on a few swordsmen, and they would most likely succeed. However, Qian Feng's joy disappeared in a flash. There's no trace of Qin Jian. No, Quan Jie replied, and his tone suddenly had some impatience. How could his thoughts not be the same as Qian Feng's? Forget it. Qian Feng also knew Quan Jie's thoughts and sent a message. Don't mess up Pan Hao's plan. We can't afford to offend Xuanyin School. I know. Quan Jie nodded, but his eyes turned slightly and smiled. Should we tell them about this? Qian Feng hesitated slightly, but when he saw Quan Jie's smile, he understood and nodded. Of course. Aren't we here to send a message? How can we not tell them? Then, Qian Feng flew away again, but not long after, he turned back and sent a message. Pan Hao also asked that Golden Core Senior, but the Golden Core Senior ignored him. Quan Jie was a little disappointed. Another 2 hours passed. If it were any other time, Quan Jie definitely wouldn't release the spirit bird so quickly. However, today his heart felt as if it was being scratched by a cat's paw. He couldn't help but slap his hand and release the spirit bird from his spirit storage bag once again. When the spiritual bird suddenly appeared, the feathers on its body suddenly exploded, and its entire body trembled, as if it was extremely uncomfortable. Chapter 2391. Quan Jie's heart ached, but he still urged the spiritual bird. The spiritual bird reluctantly flapped its wings a few times in midair and soared into the sky. After a while, Quan Jie was even more surprised. He hurriedly said to Qian Feng, Senior brother Qian, quickly go and report to the Golden Core Seniors. 10 miles away, another 200 sword cultivators have appeared. Most of them are in the sword nurturing stage. They look similar to the swordsmen from before. They are all defeated. Furthermore, half of these sword cultivators were female swordsmen. From what I see, that Qin Jian will definitely not come. Or perhaps he has been lured away by another challenge. We will be wasting our time again. Why don't we reap some rewards? All right, Hearing this, Qian Feng's face was filled with joy. Naturally, he did not dare to send out his spiritual will. Instead, he hurriedly flew out to look for Pan Hao. According to their agreement, in order to not disturb Qin Jian and expose their ambush, only the Golden Core Cultivator could send out his spiritual will. The others were not allowed to do so. Just as Qian Feng left, the spiritual bird flew back from the sky. The spiritual bird's body was even colder. A thin layer of ice had formed around its body. When it flew above Quan Jie's head, it almost fell straight down. After Quan Jie kept the spiritual bird, he looked anxiously at the spot where Qian Feng disappeared. Right above his head, tens of thousands of feet in the sky, behind a few clear white clouds, there was an eagle's shadow that was faintly discernible. Chirp! A sound came from the edge of the glacier, 1,000 feet away from Quan Jie. A message talisman flew to the peak of a mountain nearby. Then, a dozen more message talismans flew out from a peak. These message talismans flew to different locations. From the locations where the message talismans landed, a dozen late Foundation establishment cultivators appeared. Similarly, each cultivator sent out another dozen message talismans to different locations. Not long after, almost 400 Foundation establishment cultivators appeared around Quan Jie's ambush. The formation they had set up covered a few miles. The 400 cultivators who had revealed themselves did not stop there. Their figures flew up separately and flew towards the west in an outflanking manner. Quan Jie was naturally overjoyed as well. He flew up and followed behind the crowd. By the time they were several li away from the fleeing group of swordsmen, the 400 Foundation establishment cultivators had already surrounded the 300 swordsmen. Everyone's divine senses were also sweeping towards those pitiful swordsmen without restraint. The 300 sword cultivators were flying between the two mountain peaks on their flying swords. They were originally in an extremely sorry state and were abnormally exhausted. When they sensed the divine senses of the 400 Foundation establishment cultivators, they were greatly alarmed. Some of the sword cultivators with higher cultivation also sent out their divine senses. When they saw that the cultivators had already surrounded them, they became even more alarmed. The 300 sword cultivators scattered like monkeys when the tree topples and hurriedly rushed out of the mountain peaks. Outside the mountain peaks, there was another huge glacier. The oval ice surface was already shining with a faint golden brilliance under the slanting sunlight. Ha ha! Chase, when Quan Jie saw this, he was overjoyed. He shouted as he channeled his magic power and flew towards a female swordsman who was panicking. Qian Feng didn't show any signs of weakness. He chased after another female swordsman whose sword armor was torn apart, revealing her white arms. Above the crowd, a golden core cultivator with white hair and beard revealed a fierce look in his eyes. However, his expression was still cautious. He released his divine senses and scanned the surrounding 10 li radius, fearing that there might be a sword cultivator lying in ambush. However, when the 400 cultivators had completely surrounded the swordsmen, all of them laughed sinisterly as they took out their magic weapons and other items. There was nothing out of the ordinary. Only then did the Golden Core Cultivator relax. Kill! The Golden Core Cultivator also did not hesitate. He waved his hand, and the magical artifacts of the 400 cultivators of all kinds and colors flew out from all directions like a heavenly maiden scattering flowers and attacked the panicked swordsmen. When the swordsmen saw so many magic weapons flying out, their previous expressions were swept away and replaced with calmness. The flying swords under their feet also flew out to meet the enemy. Quan Jie flew in front of the crowd, following behind the fleeing female swordsman at a distance of several feet. He knew very well that this was the safest distance. If he got any closer, the female swordsman might have some secret technique, or they like to fight like a cornered beast. Just as he heard the Golden Core Cultivator's command, a sinister smile appeared on his face. He took out a rope-like magic weapon in his hand. An orange-red brilliance flashed from the rope. At the same time, the rope danced in midair and fell towards the female swordsman's towering breasts. Quan Jie could almost see the female swordsman's panic when she was trapped by the rope and all the things that happened after that. It was exactly the same as what the Golden Core cultivator saw. When a magic weapon of the rope fell on the female swordsman's head, the spinning confinement force had yet to fall. The originally panicked female swordsman suddenly smiled, turning her head and grinning at him, as if she was smiling at someone deeply in love. Oh, Quan Jie was stunned. He immediately felt that something was wrong. Sure enough, although the female swordsman was only at the 6th grade of the sword nurturing stage, she suddenly turned around and stopped in midair. The flying sword under her feet whistled and turned into a shooting star, rushing towards the magic weapon that was pouncing towards her. With a piercing sound, the flying sword pierced the brilliance of the magic weapon, making a very frightening sound. However, when he realized that the magic power of the flying sword was much weaker than his own, Quan Jie's heart that had just tightened was put at ease again. This female swordsman was obviously at the 6th grade of the sword nurturing stage, similar to a cultivator at the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. Compared to a cultivator at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment stage, she was still a little bit weaker. Quan Jie pointed his finger at the magic weapon and urged his magic power. The rope spun rapidly, and a fierce force and dazzling brilliance appeared again, carrying Quan Jie's uncontrollable desire to rush towards the female swordsman. Hiss, with a sound, Quan Jie's magic weapon had indeed caught the female swordsman's flying general. The meteor that was carrying the sword aura disappeared. A flying general that was the size of a willow leaf and overflowing with sword aura appeared in the rope. However, the remaining force of the rope did not dissipate, and it brought the flying sword down towards the female swordsman. The female swordsman's face was slightly shocked. Her figure quickly shrank, and she turned around and rushed towards a glacier 1,000 feet below her. "Ha-ha, little girl!" Quan Jie laughed loudly, and his figure rushed down along with the rope. He did not want to let the little white sheep in his mouth slip away. At the moment when Quan Jie rushed down, he was distracted and glanced at Qianfeng, who was only a few hundred feet away from him. Qianfeng was the same as him. He released the spiritual beast Lian leopard from his spiritual storage bag. It opened its bloody mouth and rushed towards the petite female swordsman with bared fangs and brandished claws. It seemed like it could catch the female swordsman in a moment. Hee. Quan Jie's heart could not help but swell. His spirit was once again invigorated, and his figure sped up. However, at this moment, with a loud bang, a thumb-sized plum blossom suddenly bloomed in the incomparably hard layer of ice. The plum blossom seemed to have bloomed in this hard layer of ice, and its development caused the whole layer of ice to explode. As the red plum blossom spun in midair and rushed into the sky, the fist-sized ice chips also flew everywhere. Quan Jie was the closest to the ice at this moment, and he bore the brunt of the red plum blossom and ice chips. However, before Quan Jie could figure out what was happening, the red plum blossom was already close to him. Quan Jie very naturally activated his spiritual power, and the light protecting his body shone brightly. As the light flashed, the fist-sized ice chips were all bounced off and even turned into ice water. However, the thumb-sized red plum blossom seemed to contain a huge amount of power, and as it sat cross-legged, it drilled into the light. Puff, puff, puff. Dozens of muffled sounds rang out, and blood splattered everywhere the red plum blossom passed. Quan Jie's light, protecting his body, was shattered by the red plum blossom, and the dozens of red plum blossom instantly penetrated his body. Quan Jie's eyes flashed with a trace of disbelief. With a scream, his vision turned black, and he fell from midair, and, until his death, he did not even see who killed him. The sudden appearance of the red plum blossom and the instant death of Quan Jie immediately aroused Qianfeng's vigilance. However, the red plum blossom was like a whirlwind, soaring up 90,000 miles, and continued to rush toward the other cultivators above Quan Jie, and Qianfeng happened to be just outside the red plum blossom. Run! Seeing the sharp light above the red plum blossom, Qianfeng smelled an extremely dangerous aura. He did not dare to chase after the escaping swordsman and waved his hand, wanting to keep Lin Bao back into his spirit storage bag. Peng, another loud sound rang out, and an orange figure rushed out from the ice. At the same time, a fist flew out, and in the blink of an eye, appeared on Lin Bao's back. Roar! Under the fist, Lin Bao was already trembling abnormally, and his forelegs knelt in midair, not daring to move at all. Illusory swordsman. Qianfeng felt the fear in Lin Bao's heart, and his heart also trembled. He did not even bother to keep the spirit beast, and his body flashed, wanting to escape from the battle. Peng! A loud sound rang out, and flesh and blood splattered everywhere. The fist landed on Lin Bao's back, and Lin Bao's bones and flesh were torn apart, and he turned into a pile of fragments that fell in mid-air. Qianfeng's heart clenched, knowing that Lin Bao was dead. However, before his heart palpitated, a sharp wind that he had never encountered before appeared from his chest and abdomen, and he saw a fist suddenly enlarging and striking towards him. Although the fist was still a few feet away, an indescribable feeling enveloped the space of a few feet around his chest and abdomen. This is bad. Qianfeng was shocked, and he slapped his hand, wanted to take out a magic weapon from his storage bag. However, his vision was slightly blurred, and the fist seemed to have passed through the space barrier, and in an instant, it hit his chest. Qianfeng's hand did not have time to take out a magic weapon, and he immediately hurriedly formed a spell, wanting to hit the fist. However, he was still too slow. With a loud pung, a purple-red brilliance flashed rapidly in Qianfeng's chest and abdomen, and was immediately annihilated. Then, with a boom, Qianfeng's body exploded from the inside, and like Lin Bao, he shattered into pieces and scattered in mid-air. Ha ha! After the red plum blossom, under the murderous fist, there was a burst of laughter. Two muscular middle-aged, illusory swordsmen, wearing sword attire, rushed out of the ice layer of the glacier and flew straight into the sky. Chapter 2392. As the two of them flew past, red plum blossoms took the lives of dozens of foundation-building cultivators. Their fists flashed and destroyed the bodies of dozens of foundation-building cultivators. Not only that, with a series of bang, 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 ice blocks several feet in size were overturned one by one. Nearly 300 swordsmen of the third or fourth level flew out from the ice. Flying swords of various colors appeared at the same time, blocking the attacks of the 400 foundation-building cultivators. We've been ambushed. The 400 cultivators who had set up the ambush saw the swordsmen of the drawing swords appear, and their hearts tightened. How could they not know what had happened? They wanted to kill Qin Jian, but they did not expect that Qin Jian would see through their plan and lead them into the ambush they had set up. What these 400 cultivators did not understand was when the swordsmen of the drawing swords had set up the ambush, and why they could not detect the swordsmen under the ice with their divine senses. Of course, these questions were no longer a problem at this time. Facing 700 to 800 swordsmen, the 400 cultivators only had one thing to do: either kill these swordsmen or escape. Kill! All the swordsmen's faces were filled with excitement, as if their prey had taken the bait, just like the previous cultivator. Flying swords appeared in their hands and fiercely pierced toward the cultivators. That cultivator was like the previous swordsman of the drawing swords. While his face was filled with panic, he also summoned the magic weapons in his hands, trying to fight for a chance to survive. Pan Hao was a male cultivator with a huge body. His muscles were bulging, and he was similar to an ordinary body cultivator. When the two illusory swordsmen appeared, he was using his magic weapon, the aquatic droplet, to smash the head of a drawing swordsman. Seeing that the illusory swordsman was right under him, and that his fists were surging up like waves, killing many cultivators, he did not dare to be careless. He activated the magic power in his body, and the aquatic droplet fell on top of his head, scattering a thin layer of brilliance to protect him. Panhao had only just managed to protect himself when a murderous fist arrived. The fist stirred up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and brought about a trembling sound. The fist's afterimage shattered Panhao's protective brilliance wherever it went. Panhao sucked in a breath of cold air and activated all the magic power in his body. The aquatic droplet also turned into the size of a fist and met the swordsman's fist. With a loud bang, Panhao's mind shook and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression was dispirited as he was knocked back several hundred feet. The brilliance of his aquatic water bead was annihilated. With a few crisp sounds, a few cracks appeared on the surface of the aquatic water bead and quickly spread across the entire magic treasure. When the aquatic water bead appeared several hundred feet away, it had already split into several pieces. When the illusory swordsman saw that Panhao was still alive, he couldn't help but feel a little surprised. However, he didn't bother to attack Panhao again. Phew! Panhao let out a long sigh. Like Xiao Mao and Feng Linbua, he was a disciple of the Xuanyin school who survived the elimination of the seedlings. Their meridians were wider and tougher than normal cultivators. Although they were only in the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage, their mana was comparable to the peak of the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage. Yet, they were able to survive the attack of the illusory swordsman. However, Panhao only relaxed for a moment before hundreds of swordsmen flew out from under the ice. Run! This was Panhao's only thought at this moment. He only had one golden core cultivator on his side, and in terms of numbers, the cultivators were inferior to the swordsmen. This was where the swordsmen were lying in ambush, and there might be some powerful sword formations. However, when Panhao turned to look at the golden core cultivator, he was puzzled. This early-stage golden core cultivator was the martial uncle of the Xuanyin school, Pang Chongtian. It was because of his support that Panhao and Feng Linbua dared to come out of the spirit stone vein they were guarding and set up an ambush in the Gale Snowfield. Pang Chongtian's face was as calm as water as he faced the two aquatic swordsmen. However, there was a hint of a sneer on his face. What? Is Qingjin afraid? We have already issued a challenge. Why is he still not coming to the Gale Snowfield? Why did he send the two of you to your deaths? Pang Chongtian's tone was filled with disappointment. What is Qingjin? Isn't he just an illusory swordsman from the Void Heaven Sword School? How can he be so powerful in your eyes? The swordsman with the red plum flying sword waved his hand, and a withered branch full of red plum blossoms appeared in his hand. Facing the snow-white sword, he looked extremely refined. However, the arrogance in his tone was as if he did not care about Qingjin at all. Greedy cultivators like you have issued challenges to the sword domain every day. However, Qingjin is just an aquatic swordsman and cannot be in two places. How can he satisfy all of you? The other bald swordsman stood in midair like a King Kong. He did not hold any flying sword in his empty hands. However, there was a faint layer of sword radiance on his exposed left arm, as if his arm was his flying sword. I was wondering. Pang Chongtian also smiled and did not seem to be afraid. He pointed with his hand and said, "Since you have come to your deaths, I have no choice but to accept it. Even if it is not Qingjin, I will still be rewarded if I take your heads back, right? You?" The red plum swordsman sneered. "You're just an early-stage golden core cultivator, and you will have a problem dealing with me. You want to kill both of us? Don't you think you are a joke? Who said that I'm the only one?" Pang Chongtian sneered. "The schemes of the Dao sect cultivators will never be understood by swordsmen from the savage land." Pang Chongtian looked behind the red plum swordsman and smiled. "Daoist Jiang and Daoist Luan can show yourselves now." Oh, the red plum swordsman was shocked and quickly looked back. However, at this moment, the other swordsman shouted angrily, "This bastard is cheating." The red plum swordsman turned around again. Indeed, Pang Chongtian had already moved. He flew in the direction he came from like a gust of wind. Aha! The red plum swordsman was not in a hurry. He smiled and said, "That's what I said. How can the Dao sect cultivators see through the ambush set up by the failing swordmaner? Liao Jianyu, let us kill this bastard. Daoist Guan is right. Please." Liao Jianyu moved and turned into a sword radiance. He chased after Pang Chongtian and chuckled softly. Pang Chongtian was the first to move. However, his flying technique was not as good as the two swordsmen. In less than 5 minutes, the two swordsmen had caught up with Pang Chongtian. Failing sword manners, Daoist Guan waved his hand. The withered branch in his hand flashed with a bright red sword radiance. Red plum blossoms appeared on the flying sword and rushed towards Pang Chongtian like a rain of red plum blossoms. The red plum blossoms cut through the air and made strange sounds. At the same time, Liao Jianyu was even faster. His left arm swayed and the same silver light flashed. His fist seemed to have left his arm and smashed towards Pang Chongtian's back like a meteor with the power to kill in one blow. Pang Chongtian did not dare to delay. He waved his right arm, and an 8 trigrams flag flew out. The 8 trigrams flag flew into the air and instantly expanded. The 8 trigrams flag fluttered in the wind. The 8 trigrams flag on the flag emitted 8 different lights and flew out of the flag to protect Pang Chongtian's back. Woo! Liao Jianyu's fist arrived first and hit the center of the 8 trigrams brilliance. Wong, there was a burst of brilliance, and the dazzling brilliance stopped the fist. However, the moment it stopped, the 8 trigrams brilliance spun rapidly and retreated a few feet before stopping. Liao Jianyu was shocked. He activated the sword origin in his body and wanted to swing his fist again. However, there was a suction force from the 8 trigrams brilliance. It was as if his fist was stuck in a quagmire and could not be pulled out. At this moment, the red plum flying sword flew into the 8 trigrams brilliance. A surge of red light instantly filled the 8 trigrams brilliance. "Break!" Liao Jianyu and Guan Jianyu cried out almost at the same time. A blinding silver light and dozens of dark red lights flashed out from the 8 dimmed lights at the same time. Rumble, there was a loud sound, and the 8 trigrams brilliance was annihilated, revealing the flag. At this moment, there were cracks all over the flag. Looking at Pang Chongtian again, his face flushed red and then turned pale. Pang Chongtian slapped his hand, and the broken 8 trigrams brilliance returned to his body. He said softly, "Daoist Jiang, Daoist Luan, if you didn't come out, I would have died." At this moment, Guan Jianyu and Liao Jianyu ignored him and continued to attack Pang Chongtian with their flying swords and fists. Haha, Daoist Pang is indeed powerful. Even though you fell into the sword cultivator's trap, you still managed to lure them over. A rough voice came from the mountain below the 3 of them. Along with the voice, a ray of purple light shot into the sky towards sword friend Guan. Inside the light was an inch-long flying sword that was flashing with a demonic aura. It stabbed towards sword friend Guan's forehead. A few hundred feet away from the purple brilliance, there was also a blue brilliance. There was water splashing inside, and it shot toward Liao Jianyu with a power that could shatter everything. Oh, he still has a backup plan. Liao Jianyu and Guan Jianyu saw 2 more Dharma treasures flying toward them and realized something. They looked at each other. Liao Jianyu formed a sword seal and punched again at the water splashing below him. Boom! With a loud bang, the fist smashed into the water. Although the water splashed everywhere, the fist was also sent flying back under the pressure of the water. Khanate heavy water? Liao Jianyu was also knowledgeable. He raised his eyebrows and exclaimed in shock. "Haha, since you know the power of this treasure, why don't you give up your life?" Under the blue brilliance, a middle-aged cultivator with a face as white as jade flew up. It was Kunlun Sect's Jiangshan. Jiangshan was dressed in a Taoist robe. His left hand was stretched out, and there was a small jade bottle in it. The monstrous splash of water had flown out from that small bottle. As a murderous look flashed between Jiangshan's brows, the jade bottle once again shook with a blue brilliance. Another drop of connate heavy water flew out. The moment the heavy water left the jade bottle, it immediately turned into millions of water droplets that formed a wave that slammed towards Liao Jianyu. Chapter 2393. Swordsman Guan saw the purple flying sword and sneered in his heart. He waved his hand, and hundreds of red plum blossoms surged forward, stabbing towards the purple light. CSIs. A sharp sound rang out, and the dozens of red plum blossoms were pierced by the purple flying sword, turning into dark red splatters that fell to the ground. The purple flying sword light turned into a purple line within the red plum blossoms. It bypassed the red plum blossoms and stabbed towards Swordsman Guan's forehead. A spirit-severing flying sword? However, Guan Jianyu felt an incomparable sharp pain between his eyebrows. He suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but cry out in shock. Ha ha! Under the purple light, a short cultivator with a pointy mouth appeared. It was Luan Jiansheng, the golden core cultivator of the Tongyi sect. He held a palm-sized gourd in his hand. The purple light was emitted from the gourd that had been uncovered. How could it be a spirit-severing flying sword? Liao Jianyu waved his hand, and his fist turned into dozens of fists. Each one was like a meteor as they flew towards the waves of heavy water. Swordsman Guan suddenly understood and activated his sword technique. The red plum blossoms once again flew in a mysterious dance and cut apart the purple line. That's right, it's just an imitation magic treasure. Seeing the spirit-severing flying sword easily broken by the red plum blossoms, Swordsman Guan let out a long sigh and sneered. If you could use a real spirit-severing flying sword, you'd already be a late nascent soul cultivator, right? Why would you ambush us illusory swordsmen? Ha, why would I need a real spirit-severing flying sword to deal with you two illusory swordsmen? Luan Jiansheng laughed, and the purple light from the gourd flew out again. It circled around the dozens of red plum blossoms that had already flown to Luan Jiansheng's side. Pa, like candlelight bursting in the night. The sword light that could easily kill a Foundation establishment cultivator was annihilated by the purple light. Only a 3-foot-long flying sword remained. Swordsman Guan couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He knew in his heart that his flying sword was indeed inferior to the spirit-severing flying dagger. He was afraid that he really wasn't a match for this guy. Guan Jianyu looked at Liao Jianyu again. Although there were quite a number of illusionary fists, they weren't as solid as the previous one. It was barely satisfactory to withstand Jiangshan's connate heavy water. Let's go. Guan Jianyu waved his hand, and the red plum sword flew back. Guan Jianyu's body flashed with sword light, and his entire body condensed into the shape of a giant sword. He flew towards a glacier from before. Ha! At this point, you still want to escape? Pang Chongtian laughed heartily when he saw this. With a wave of his hand, the damaged 8 trigrams flag appeared once again. The slightly dim 8 balls of light whizzed and rotated in front of Guan Jianyu. Ignorant, Guan Jianyu sneered. A sound similar to the sound of a golden drum rang out. The giant sword pierced into the 8 balls of light. Fellow Taoist Luan, help me. The huge sword's sharp sword Qi pierced into the 8 trigrams flag. The 8 balls of light were already in a mess. Pang Chongtian panicked and had no choice but to call for help. Watch this old man. Luan, Jiansheng moved with the voice. He threw the small purple gourd in his hand, and the spirit-severing flying knife immediately flew out of the small gourd. It turned into a swimming fish and rapidly pierced towards Guan Jianyu's flying sword. Before the spirit-severing flying knife could get close, the killing intent that was suppressing the sword spirit was forced into the flying sword. The giant sword rumbled and shook a few times. Guan Jianyu could no longer maintain his flying sword form and revealed his huge body. Guan Jianyu's eyes flashed with shock. He didn't have time to deal with the 8 trigrams flag. He waved his hand, and the red plum blossom blocked the spirit-severing flying knife again. Fellow Taoist phone, fellow Taoist you, if you don't come out now, I will really be helpless. Guan Jianyu smiled bitterly. He looked around and whispered, "Oh." When these words entered their ears, not only was Luan Jianxing shocked, even Pang Chongtian was shocked. This shock was as if they had seen the world's biggest joke. "Ha ha, you are about to die, and you are still playing tricks. Don't you think it's funny?" Pang Chongtian didn't think that the sword cultivators would have any other means to deal with his hidden attack. However, just as Pang Chongtian finished speaking, a gust of wind blew through the sky. Two bird cultivators flapped their 100-feet-long wings and rushed down. That arrogant and unruly voice sounded, "Haha, just a few boy. Guanpeng, you can't deal with them? I am not as good as the two seniors." Guanpeng controlled the red plum blossom sword and tried his best to block the spirit-severing flying knife. He smiled and said, "These are 3 golden core cultivators. Their magic treasures are the perfect counter to my flying sword. I still need the help of the 2 seniors." Wu, the bird cultivator in front, flapped his wings. A strong wind blew from his wings. Countless wind blades that could cut through ice flew towards Luan Jiansheng and Pang Chongtian like a storm. The bird cultivator behind him was even more powerful. A faint blue light flashed between his wings, and the abundant water-based spiritual energy above the glacier immediately condensed. As he flapped his wings, the wind blades swooped down, and each ice particle seemed to be condensed with a huge amount of mana. Go, Pang Chongtian wanted to use the 8 trigrams flag again. However, when he scanned it with his divine perception, he sensed the power of the wind blades and ice particles. He knew that his 8 trigrams flag might not be able to block them. He shouted and flew towards the south. After Pang Chongtian left, Jiang Shan and Luan Jiansheng didn't dare to stay any longer. They kept their magic treasures and used their flying techniques to escape. Luckily, the 3 of them were surrounding Guanpeng and Liao Jianyu. The 2 bird cultivators, Wind Sword Friend and Rain Sword Friend, were attacking from above. There was a gap for them to escape. Chase! Swordsmen would never look down on cultivators fleeing. Sword Friend Wind and Sword Friend Rain flapped their wings and chased after the 3 like rays of light. Guanpeng was a little hesitant. He used his divine perception to scan the situation at the glacier and then used it to scan the area within dozens of miles. However, when Guanpeng's divine sense swept to the east, it paused for a moment. Then his face relaxed, and he didn't hesitate to sweep to other places. When he saw that there were no special cultivators within a few dozen kilometers, his figure flashed, and he chased after them on the red plum sword. Illusory swordsman. On the flowing cloud-flying ship dozens of miles away, Guanpeng's divine perception locked onto Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao. That strong divine perception indicated that a golden core sword cultivator had seen them. Of course, Li Zongbao and Xiao Hua's reactions were different from what Guanpeng expected. They were actually excited. "Brotherly, is this divine perception Qin Jian's?" Xiao Hua asked Li Zongbao hurriedly when the divine perception paused for a moment. Chapter 2394. I'm not too sure. Li Zongbao had never met Qin Jian before, so he couldn't be sure. However, since they're in the Gale Snowfield, it must be Qin Jian. Quick, let's kill our way over. Not good. There are actually 4 illusory swordsmen and 3 golden core swordsmen. I don't know which one is Qin Jian. Xiao Hua stealthily released his Buddhist sense and easily saw the 7 people who had already flown to the edge of his Buddhist sense. At this time, the bird cultivator, Feng Jianyu, was slightly startled. As if he had noticed the Buddhist sense, he immediately released his divine sense. Xiao Hua was shocked. This was the 2nd time someone had seen through his Buddhist sense, and this person wasn't a Buddhist disciple. He naturally didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly withdrew his Buddhist sense. Sensing that Feng Jianyu had released his divine sense, Guanpeng asked curiously, "Senior Feng, is there something wrong?" Feng Jianyu didn't answer, but scanned with his divine sense. After a while, He revealed a trace of confusion and replied, I seem to have sensed someone spying on us. It can't be. Guan Peng was about to cry. The bird cultivators surnamed Feng, and you were his last resort. If the Dao sect cultivators still had a backup plan, he really had to admire the cultivators' schemes. But this spying doesn't seem to be the Dao sect's method. Feng Jianyu added, and it's coming from that direction. Seeing that Feng Jianyu was pointing in the direction of the Gale Snowfield and not the direction he was pursuing, Guan Peng's heart calmed down. He pondered for a moment and said, Junior has already scouted this area. Not far from where we ambushed the Dao sect cultivators, there should be 2 7-skills sect disciples riding a flying boat. However, their cultivation is only at the foundation establishment stage, so they can't affect the battle. Moreover, once they sense that something is wrong, they'll definitely escape on the flying boat. There's nothing special in the surrounding 10 miles. 2 foundation establishment cultivators? Feng Jianyu was slightly puzzled. What are they doing in the Gale Snowfield? How would Junior know? Perhaps they're here for the Gale or Vein of Xuanyan School. Guan Peng answered casually, but he was still worried about Feng Jianyu's innate perception. He asked, Did Senior discover anything? No. The bird cultivator, surnamed Feng, said resolutely, I didn't even see those 2 foundation establishment disciples. Perhaps. Guan Peng was a little hesitant. Junior should go and watch the children fight. The bird cultivator, surnamed Feng, heard the questioning tone in Guan Peng's voice. He knew that Guan Peng was asking if his perception was correct. The bird cultivator, surnamed Feng, laughed bitterly. That was merely a type of perception, one that disappeared in a flash. How could he be sure? No need. The bird cultivator, surnamed Feng, pondered for a moment before coming to a decision. I didn't really sense that person. Perhaps I was just nervous. What's more, that person was able to evade my detection. His cultivation is definitely above mine. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for you to stay. This Junior understands. Guan Peng had already taken the disturbance of the Buddhist awareness as a sign of nervousness from the bird cultivator, surnamed Feng. After all, even though his cultivation was inferior to the bird cultivators, the difference wasn't that great. How could the bird cultivator sense something that he couldn't? The cunning cultivator is escaping towards the spirit stone mine of Xuanyan School. If I'm not wrong, they will send out a message talisman. It's best that we stick to our original plan. It's better for this Junior to chase after them than to stay behind. The bird cultivator, surnamed Feng, didn't say anything else. He flapped his wings, and his body suddenly sped up as he chased after Pang Chong Tian and the others. Which one is Qin Jian? In the distance, Xiaohua steered the flying boat. He was still hesitating whether he should tell Li Zongbao, or if he should steer the flowing cloud flying boat and chase after them like Li Zongbao. After all, if he added himself, it wouldn't be difficult to kill 4 sword cultivators. If I do that, I won't be able to hide my cultivation. Xiaohua smiled bitterly again. He had already decided in his heart that he would reveal his cultivation in this battle. However, he could only reveal 40% of his cultivation, which would stop at the late stage of foundation establishment. Even if he used his Dharma treasure, he wouldn't be able to surpass the early stage of Golden Core. After killing the beast cultivators earlier, Li Zongbao already had doubts about Xiaohua's Dharma power. Even though he didn't say it, Xiaohua knew in his heart. If he could even kill Golden Core cultivators, there was no point in hiding it. Not good. Just as Xiaohua was hesitating, Li Zongbao shouted, My Dao sect disciples are being attacked by sword cultivators. Xiaohua, don't be slow. Hurry up and steer the flying boat. You only noticed it now. Xiaohua made a rough estimation. He knew that even though Li Zongbao was already in the late stage of foundation establishment, his spiritual force was still shocking. They were still 20 miles away from the battle, but his spiritual force was more than twice that of a normal late-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Yes, I understand. Following Li Zongbao's instructions, Xiaohua steered the flowing cloud flying boat. The flowing cloud flying boat was indeed faster than before, and it rushed towards the oval ice lake. The battle above the ice lake was definitely comparable to the battle at Golden Spring Mountain. Hundreds of Dharma treasures stirred the heaven and earth spiritual chi and rushed into the air. All kinds of brilliance bloomed and smashed towards the sword cultivators opposite them. Among the sword cultivators, flying swords were also released. Sword light flashed and pierced into the cultivators' bodies. Blood light flashed, comparable to the brilliance of Dharma treasures. The smell of blood gradually rose, comparable to the surging spiritual chi. The 400 cultivators of the Tao sect were surrounded by nearly 700 sword cultivators. They fought with all their might. In the time that the Golden Core cultivators fought and hurriedly escaped, nearly 100 people had already died. Their corpses were all pierced, and their incomplete corpses fell onto the ice surface that was as cold as a mirror. The blood flowing on the corpses only flowed half an inch before it froze. Looking at the sword cultivators, they were not much better off. Dozens of corpses were also left near the sword cultivators' corpses. Their heads, chests, and bodies were all badly mutilated. They were all hit by Dharma treasures. The corpses above the ice lake, other than the difference between sword equipment and Taoist robes, there was really no difference between the two corpses. Or perhaps the living people were different, but the dead people were no different. Don't you dare hurt my Tao sect disciples. Li Zongbao didn't wait for the flying boat to approach the battlefield. As usual, he shouted and flew up. The immortal piercing whip in his hand was also held upside down. The whip streaked through the air and smashed towards the sword cultivator closest to him. The two sides in the fierce battle simply didn't have the time to check the arrival of Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao. Only when they heard Li Zongbao's angry roar did they look up. However, when they saw only the two of them, the cultivators' hearts turned cold, while the sword cultivators' hearts secretly laughed. However, what use could two Foundation establishment disciples make in this great battle? Oh, why isn't he a disciple of my Seven Skills sect? Naturally, there were also those who first saw the flowing cloud flying boat and then saw Li Zongbao. They had some strange thoughts, but this thought disappeared in an instant. A sword cultivator's flying sword was more important than the flowing cloud flying boat. Of course, there were also those who secretly thought of seizing the boat and fleeing. However, after Li Zongbao flew out of the flowing cloud flying boat, Xiao Hua also put the boat into his space. This ended some people's thoughts. Li Zongbao, senior brother Li, hurry. There were actually disciples of the Utopia faction here. When they saw Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip, they immediately recognized Li Zongbao. Knowing Li Zongbao's power, they hurriedly shouted. Xiao Hua's divine sense quickly swept through the crowd of cultivators. He actually didn't see any disciples wearing the Imperial Thunder sect's robes. Don't hurt my Utopia faction's disciples. Seeing that the Utopia faction's disciples were in imminent danger, how could Li Zongbao still cooperate with Xiao Hua? Whip shadows repeatedly smashed towards a few sword cultivator disciples. Pa pa pa, a few crisp sounds rang out. How could those swordsmen, who had fought with the cultivators until their sword energy was somewhat exhausted, resist Li Zongbao's immortal piercing whip? Several flying swords were scattered in all directions, and the whip shadows also fell on the swordsmen's bodies. Several swordsmen fell into the air with their flesh lacerated. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Great! When the cultivators around Li Zongbao saw this scene, their hearts were greatly shaken. Their somewhat disheartened hearts were once again filled with vitality. Hurry, fellow swordsmen, kill this bastard first. Not far from Li Zongbao, a 5th-grade swordsman saw this and hurriedly transmitted his voice. There were originally more swordsmen than cultivators. In a short moment, there were more than a dozen 4th-grade swordsmen who had drawn their swords and surrounded Li Zongbao. So much so that there were also several 5th-grade swordsmen who had drawn their swords surrounding Xiao Hua. Kill! The swordsmen surrounding Li Zongbao quickly released their flying swords at the same time and stabbed towards Li Zongbao from all directions. Seeing all kinds of sword lights, whether flowing water or dancing fireflies, fly out, Li Zhongbao's eyes slightly narrowed. Similarly, he didn't shrink back and wave his hand. The immortal piercing whip once again flew out. Woo-woo. A sound came from his whip's shadows, unexpectedly causing the solid primordial spirits of many sword cultivators to somewhat sway. Poo-pee-you. A series of chaotic sounds rang out. Every whip shadow of the immortal piercing whip struck a flying sword. Whether flowing water or fireflies, they all turned into flying flowers and shattered. All of the flying swords had shallow marks on them. The faces of the dozen swordsmen who had drawn their swords were slightly pale. Clearly, their primordial spirits were injured. The way they looked at Li Zhongbao was different again. This late Foundation establishment, white-haired cultivator from the Utmost Happiness faction, was really too fierce. In one move, he had the strength to break a dozen fourth-grade swordsmen who had drawn their swords. This magic power was directly comparable to a golden core cultivator. But what made them terrified was that Li Zhongbao actually didn't stop. The immortal piercing whip in his hand overflowed with splendor again. Complicated talismans swam up and down. With a wave of Li Zhongbao's hand, another row of whip shadows struck out. Run! This was the common thought of the dozen swordsmen. But just as the swordsmen urged their swords to flee, the immortal piercing whip had already reached them. Papa! A soft sound rang out. Nearly 10 swordsmen screamed miserably and fell from the cloud. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Only a few swordsmen barely escaped the killing whip shadows. Again, the person who had previously organized a group of swordsmen to besiege Li Zhongbao also narrowly escaped. He gnashed his teeth and shouted, "We have 700 cultivators. I don't believe that this guy can kill us one by one. Even if it's tiring, we'll exhaust him to death." Of course, seeing that Li Zhongbao's face was already a little flushed, it was already a reaction from using the immortal piercing whip too much. Even if one whip didn't hinder him, or several whips didn't hinder him, it was impossible for Li Zhongbao to swing the whip dozens of times. We'll also come to rescue fellow cultivator Li. The cultivators of the Taoist faction also had foresight. Immediately, someone clamored and flew towards Li Zhongbao. He himself took a medicinal pill and took a breath. Seeing Xiao Hua take down a dozen sword cultivators so easily, his eyes also flashed with extraordinary splendor. Just as Xiao Hua was happily shaking the soul-suppressing bell, his mind suddenly became muddled, and he also felt a similar feeling of his soul wanting to leave his body from the mysterious dark clouds. What's going on? Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. He hastily released his Buddhist sense, but he didn't see any eyesores in the surroundings. Apart from the swordsmen hiding in all directions, and the cultivators who were wild with joy, there was no one else. Could it be? Xiao Hua suddenly understood. He didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest, and hastily sent his primordial spirit into the mysterious dark cloud. Sure enough, outside the mysterious dark cloud, the brilliance of Xiao Hua's newly obtained spiritual armor was somewhat dim, as if it had suffered a heavy blow. And inside the mysterious dark cloud, within the heaven ring of Qi, the originally spirited primordial spirit was now dispirited and listless, as if it had used too much strength. It quietly floated there, without the slightest bit of strength. And above the primordial spirit, the clear sky was now densely covered with dark clouds, and those dark clouds were also somewhat damaged. I was a little too pleased with myself, even if the power of my soul is extremely great. After all, this young master's cultivation is only at the heaven ring of Qi. I still can't control it as I wish. Xiao Hua understood that he had suffered a backlash from the soul-absorbing bell, causing his heaven ring of Qi primordial spirit to be like this. He thought for a moment and hastily put the soul-toad and soul-absorbing bell into space. Seeing Xiao Hua actually put away the soul-absorbing bell, many cultivators who had gathered couldn't help but feel disappointed. A late-stage Foundation establishment disciple anxiously said, "This junior brother of the Imperial Thunder Sect, that magic tool of yours is very useful. Why don't you continue to use it? If you knock it a dozen more times, these swordsmen will all be killed by us." Xiao Hua spread out his hands and said with a bitter smile, "This senior brother, it's not that this little brother doesn't want to. You see, this little brother is only at the early stage of Foundation establishment, not even at the middle stage of Foundation establishment. That magic tool consumes magic power, and this little brother's magic power is already insufficient. If I knock a dozen more times, I'll definitely die. It's only a magic tool." That disciple was at a loss for words, but without waiting for him to speak again, another flying sword took advantage of the chaos to fly over, scaring him into a fluster. How could he still have the time to blame Xiao Hua? "Go!" Xiao Hua pointed his finger at the cloud-suppressing seal, and that magic tool once again danced with a rumbling sound, shooting down several swordsmen into the air. Seeing Xiao Hua actually use his magic tool again, that late-stage Foundation establishment disciple who had just reprimanded Xiao Hua was somewhat speechless. At this time, Xiao Hua had used the cloud-suppressing seal to kill nearly 15 swordsmen, and used the soul-absorbing bell to shoot down nearly 60 swordsmen. Li Zongbao's side had also killed 30 swordsmen. In total, 100 swordsmen had fallen because of the arrival of these two people. However, the fall of these 100 or so swordsmen was still not enough to reverse the defeat of the cultivators. Moreover, in the eyes of the swordsmen, Xiao Hua and Li Zongbao had done it in a spurt of energy, so they were bound to exhaust themselves again and again. Just as the swordsman expected, Xiao Hua had put away his soul-absorbing bell, and Li Zongbao, who was previously the most eye-catching, was even worse. At this time, his piercing immortal whip was no longer the same as it had been at the beginning, where it could strike several people at once. It could only strike one swordsman at a time, and that piercing immortal whip's power was also greatly reduced. "Kill!" Another unknown sword cultivator cheered from a distance. "They've already exhausted their magic power. We only need to put in a bit more effort, and we'll definitely be able to kill them all." Many swordsmen couldn't see whether Xiao Hua's magic power had been exhausted or not, but the cloud-suppressing seal was also not as conspicuous as the piercing immortal whip. However, the cultivators could clearly see that Li Zongbao's face was flashing with an extremely abnormal red halo. This was precisely the symptom of taking too many medicinal pills, causing spiritual energy to stagnate in his body. Chapter 2396. Li Zongbao once again struck down a swordsman with a piercing immortal whip, and another flying sword quietly approached from the side. Li Zongbao simply had no time to detect it. After Xiao Hua blocked the sword cultivator's flying sword, he sighed and waved his hand. The soaring dragon shears flew out, and a golden light flashed and split the flying sword in half. When he saw the familiar golden light, Li Zongbao suddenly came to his senses. He looked back at Xiao Hua and forced a smile. Looking at Li Zongbao's smile that was uglier than crying, Xiao Hua suddenly had a trace of understanding in his heart. Reputation is also tiring. If Li Zongbao wasn't so famous in the utmost happiness faction, he could totally withdraw and leave now. But because of this reputation, he had to protect it, make it difficult for him to escape. Look at me again. Who knows who I am? Even if they know I'm a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect, so what? Xiao Hua's cultivation is not even in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment stage. It's already good that I can escape. Can I still care about you? Even if I can't brazenly use the flowing cloud flying ship of the Qiqiao sect, I still have my life. What about Li Zongbao? If this guy didn't come with me today, I don't even know if he can keep his life. But who asked him to be so lucky? To be able to come with me. This is also a cause and effect. Maybe it's the cause and effect that I sensed in the Golden Spring Mountain Array. Presumably, Xiao Hua pointed his finger and the cloud-suppressing seal was stored in the space. Then, with a shake of his shoulder, the more than 400 feet Phoenix celestial body let out a phoenix cry and was released from his physical body. It's a little weird. Once the phoenix celestial body was released from his physical body, a strange feeling filled Xiao Hua's mind. It was as if another him had appeared in the Dawn Rain continent, and the more than 400 feet phoenix celestial body was his own body. Previously, Xiao Hua's physical body and the phoenix celestial body had the same feeling, but it was very different from this feeling. Yes, it was a completely different feeling, a kind of dominating celestial body, a kind of feeling of seeing the world through the eyes of the celestial body. The phoenix celestial body hovered in the air. Not only did its aura become more intense, but its previously blurry eyes also opened at this moment. However, there was a faint silver-white brilliance flashing in his eyes. Within the brilliance, there were countless planets that were slowly revolving. Xiao Hua's phoenix celestial body spread its wings, and the wind and lightning between its wings vibrated. Several purple lightning bolts shot out from between its wings and struck several sword cultivators. At the same time, the phoenix celestial body's claws also brandished lightning, and dozens of lightning bolts shot out at lightning speed, hitting the swordsman who wanted to attack Li Zongbao. Even the faint black clouds in the sky were gradually condensing, as if attracted by the phoenix celestial body. Lightning was a swordsman's nemesis. When the dozen or so lightning bolts struck out, each of them struck down a swordsman's flying sword and injured the swordsman. Not good. He's the Terror Phoenix. A hysterical voice sounded from afar. All of a sudden, fear appeared on the faces of the swordsmen who were shocked by the phenomenon of the Phoenix Dharma body flying out. As for the other cultivators of the Tao sect, they were also shocked. Among them, there were also true bloodline disciples, but they didn't dare to release their celestial bodies. With celestial bodies, they could use secret techniques in battle, but in a fight with swordsmen, the celestial body would be an absolute target for the flying sword once it appeared. No one dared to take such a big risk. However, not only did Xiao Hua do it, but his celestial body was also incomparably powerful once it appeared. The Imperial Thunder technique couldn't be used with his physical body. What made the cultivators even more confused was the fear of swordsmen. In fact, even Xiao Hua himself didn't know that his reputation was so resounding. The Terror Phoenix, this code name that represented slaughter, spread like wildfire after the Battle of Chicken Cry Mountain. Of course, this was only limited to sword nurturing and drawing swordsmen. Illusory swordsmen were rarely heard of. However, after the Battle of Golden Spring Mountain, this reputation spread to all swordsmen below sword transformation. After all, there was no wall that didn't have a crack in this world. The dozen or so illusory sword cultivators of the Ling Feng sword sect went to the Golden Spring Mountain Spirit Stone vein, and none of them survived. This was already a secret that everyone knew. What did Ling Yunwu go there for? Why was there such a big fanfare? Perhaps no one knew the purpose, but these swordsmen knew that Ling Yunwu and the dozen or so illusory swordsmen of the Ling Feng sword sect were going to kill the cultivator of the Imperial Thunder sect called Terror Phoenix, a mere Foundation establishment cultivator. However, nearly 20 illusory swordsmen didn't survive. In the Golden Spring Mountain Spirit Stone vein, only 13 Tao sect cultivators survived. Among them, there were no Imperial Thunder sect disciples. In other words, 20 illusory swordsmen died together with the Terror Phoenix. When they heard this news, the other illusory swordsmen were all shocked. They really couldn't think of how a Foundation establishment cultivator could kill 20 swordsmen whose strength was comparable to Gold Core stage. However, when they understood the situation of the Golden Spring Mountain Great Array, they suddenly understood. Although the Terror Phoenix couldn't kill them all, it could at least delay them all, right? This also explained the huge loss of sword cultivators in Golden Spring Mountain. That was 20 illusory swords. However, even if the Terror Phoenix could delay all 20 illusory swords when the Golden Spring Mountain Great Array was activated, the strength of the Terror Phoenix definitely couldn't be underestimated. Of course, this was only their guess, but this guess was also infinitely close to the reality. When this rumor reached the ears of the illusory swordsmen, it changed again. They were originally afraid of the Terror Phoenix. As the rumor spread, it became that the Terror Phoenix had killed nearly 20 illusory swords by itself. Those illusory swordsmen also risked their lives to perish together with the Terror Phoenix. Thus, in these 5 years, the Terror Phoenix became a legend. A legend of one person resisting over 1,000 illusory swordsmen. A legend of one person exterminating 10 illusory swords by himself. Now, when everyone was in the midst of killing, when everyone was shocked by the lightning, that illusory swordsman shouted out the name of the Terror Phoenix. How could it not cause all the illusory swordsmen to panic? The appearance of the Terror Phoenix was a question. This killing god killed nearly 20 illusory swords by himself and escaped unscathed. The Golden Spring Mountain Great Array that even the illusory swordsmen were helpless against was also unable to trap him. Such a ferocious cultivator, which illusory swordsman could stop him? The Terror Phoenix is alive. The Terror Phoenix is here. Quickly run. In the blink of an eye, this thought of fleeing in fear spread from Xiaohua to all the illusory swordsmen. Speaking of which, it was quite normal. The battlefield was such a wondrous place. If everyone worked together to kill, even if they were weaker, they could still win. However, if someone had the intention to flee, everyone would immediately have the same thought. Even if they were stronger, they could still retreat in defeat. Once they were defeated, they would scatter. This was probably the saying. Nearly 500 to 600 illusory swordsmen retreated like a flock of bees without the slightest bit of order. This caused the cultivators who were already half dead to be stunned on the spot. They couldn't understand if the illusory swordsmen were really defeated and retreated, or if they had some tricks to harm others. Everyone stood in midair blankly. Their magic treasures and other items were activated in midair. They didn't know if they should chase or chase. Not only was Xiao Hua stunned, even his Phoenix Dharma body was also frozen in midair. Rumble. Lightning also condensed between the Phoenix claws. He was baffled as he watched the illusory swordsman flee. Only when all the illusory swordsmen had flown several hundred feet away did Xiao Hua wake up, as if from a dream. His wings flapped, and more than 10 lightning bolts struck down. Quickly chased, these illusory swordsmen really retreated in defeat. As Xiao Hua spoke, his Phoenix Dharma body flapped its wings and chased after the illusory swordsman. The shadow of nearly 400 feet was cast on the ice lake, blocking the bodies of some illusory swordsmen. Those illusory swordsmen were even more frightened. They urged their flying swords with all their might, wanting to escape the shadow of the Phoenix Dharma body. This is a little strange. At this time, Xiao Hua suddenly discovered that his Phoenix Dharma body could actually fly several hundred feet away. It was even extending and didn't need his own body to follow. This secret method of tempering the Dharma body is indeed useful. Xiao Hua's primordial spirit was very strong, but none of it could truly leave the body. Now that he saw the Phoenix Dharma body showing signs of leaving, he was naturally very happy. Of course, the Phoenix Dharma body stopped after 200 feet away from the body. It couldn't go any further. Oh, why aren't you chasing? Xiao Hua probed the depths of the Phoenix Dharma body and was about to urge his flying technique. But when he turned his head, he saw that all the Tao sect cultivators had stopped, put away their magic tools and magic treasures, and began to take medicinal pills. Fellow Taoists from the Imperial Thunder sect, a Middle Foundation establishment cultivator respectfully replied when he heard Xiao Hua's question, "It's not that we don't chase, but that we can't. You see, we have less than 200 people. How could we dare to continue chasing? We are already overjoyed that they can retreat. Besides, who knows if these cunning illusory swordsmen have an ambush ahead? It turned out that these cultivators were also frightened by the illusory swordsman's ambush. They had all forgotten how they treated illusory swordsmen. This. Xiaohua looked at Li Zongbao again. Li Zongbao's face was the same as before, and there was even a hint of paleness in the pale gold color. Presumably, it was more serious than before. Yes, in this kind of situation, it's fine if they can escape with their lives, but who would still chase after illusory swordsman? Xiaohua nodded slightly. Then, Xiaohua's face flushed red again, looking like he had suffered a backlash from his true essence. Senior Marshal Brotherly. Xiaohua withdrew his Phoenix Dharma body and flew in front of Li Zongbao, asking in a low voice, "How is Senior Marshal Brother's situation? What should we do next?" Little Brother's magic power has also suffered a backlash. Li Zongbao looked at this Imperial Thunder Sect disciple who surprised him again and again. He opened his mouth, not knowing what to say. After a moment, he said in a low voice, "I'm fine. I just need to cultivate for a few days. What's important now is that we quickly change our location and don't let the illusory swordsman come back. However, with Junior Marshal Brother Xiao here, I'm afraid they won't dare to come back." Li Zongbao looked at Xiaohua thoughtfully and added, "However, you can't show that your magic power is exhausted. If they see through it, we'll all be in trouble." Chapter 2397. Xiaohua scratched his head and smiled apologetically. "I also don't understand this matter. What terrifying phoenix? I've never heard of it. Who knows what kind of madness these sword cultivators have?" Maybe. Li Zongbao declined to comment. In fact, he was also muttering in his heart. To be able to scare away hundreds of sword cultivators, he was afraid it was a late-stage golden core cultivator or even a nascent soul cultivator. Although Xiaohua's cultivation was powerful, he was still far from being able to scare away sword cultivators. "We'll leave first," Li Zongbao shouted and flew away first. The other cultivators didn't dare to be negligent and hurriedly followed, flying towards Li Zongbao and Xiaohua. Xiaohua was naturally with Li Zongbao. Beside them were a dozen disciples of the Utopia faction. The rest of the cultivators kept a distance from them. They were especially respectful and curious as they looked at this young cultivator. To be able to scare away so many sword cultivators, this kind of cultivator, how come they've never heard of him? Terrifying Phoenix? Is it this young Foundation establishment cultivator? Of course, there were already some cultivators who started to follow Xiaohua's train of thought, thinking that the swordsman must have made a mistake. After flying for more than half a day, they arrived near an icy lake. The mountain range here was somewhat continuous. It seemed that they could hide. Some of the cultivators took out the items used to set up the array. Once the array was set up, they hid within it. With a flash of light, all of them disappeared. Phew! Apart from Xiaohua, everyone let out a sigh of relief. They sat down cross-legged and took medicinal pills to regulate their breathing, striving to recover as soon as possible. Although Xiaohua didn't need to regulate his breathing, he still took medicinal pills and pretended to regulate his breathing. After waiting for half a day, everyone's injuries were slightly healed, and people started to come over to strike up a conversation. Some exchanged greetings with Li Zongbao, some thanked Xiaohua, and beat around the bush to inquire about Xiaohua's origins. Xiaohua smiled at first, but when he heard his name being asked, he couldn't help but feel somewhat displeased. He didn't dislike others asking his name, but when he thought about how he couldn't escape it because of some reputation and couldn't act shamelessly, Xiaohua didn't want to tell others his name. Li Zongbao seemed to see Xiaohua's impatience. He waved his hand and said, "Fellow cultivators, my junior brother is somewhat tired. Let's not disturb him." "That's right. How did you get ambushed by sword cultivators?" "Senior Brotherly, speaking of this matter, we still need Junior Brother Pan, Hao from Xuanyan School, to explain." That disciple hastily went to look for Pan Hao. Not long after, Pan Hao, who had lost an arm, hastily came over to greet Li Zongbao and Xiaohua. Junior Apprentice Brother Pan is also a Xuanyan School disciple that participated in the Great Battle. Seeing Pan Hao's Taoist robe, Li Zongbao asked curiously, "Ew, how did you encounter a sword cultivator here? Is it the conference hall's plan or the Xuanyin cult's plan?" Pan Hao only hesitated for a moment before speaking the truth. In any case, he still had a golden core cultivator above him, so he wasn't afraid of anything. "Oh, I see." Li Zongbao nodded to himself. He finally understood that the information he had obtained in the Sky Patrol City was planned by the golden core cultivator of Xuanyin School and not by Qingjian. It's just that this matter is really out of my control. Not only did sword cultivators set up an ambush, but there were also 2 golden core cultivators. Junior apprentice Brother Pang led them to the vicinity of the Spirit Stone vein in the Gale Snowfield. I'm afraid that he wanted to join forces with junior apprentice Brother Ji Mingkuan, who was guarding the Spirit Stone vein, to resist the enemy together. Yes, junior apprentice Brother Pang could only do so. Li Zongbao nodded slightly and sighed. This was what it meant to go for wool and come home shorn. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Xiao Huan naturally knew that sword cultivators had as many as 4 illusory swords and 3 golden core cultivators. It was definitely not just one, as Pan Hao said. I have a good friend in Xuanyin School named Zhuo Qingyuan. I wonder how he is now. Xiao Hua opened his eyes and asked, "Oh, so you and junior apprentice Brother Zhuo are very close." Pan Hao saw Xiao Hua ask a rare question and hurriedly smiled apologetically. Junior apprentice Brother Zhuo's cultivation has always been stagnant in the Qi refinement realm. Of course, he was sent out during the war. Unfortunately, he died on the battlefield in the first battle. Even his corpse was not found. Oh, Xiao Hua sighed. For no reason, he felt a burst of sadness in his heart. He recalled the first time he saw Zhuo Qingyuan outside Jinghua City. At that time, he was only at the 2nd layer of the Qi refinement realm, while Zhuo Qingyuan was already at the 11th layer of the Qi refinement realm. Even Xiao Mao was already at the 4th layer of the Qi refinement realm. The second time he saw Zhuo Qingyuan was with Kai Zhuoxia. Moreover, because he received information about the Fire Essence Flame Crystal, he began his miraculous journey of using the Fire Essence Flame Crystal to refine his body. The third time he saw Zhuo Qingyuan was at the Taiqing Sect's Feather Immortal Assembly. At that time, Xiao Hua was already at the beginning of the 12th layer of the Qi refinement realm. Zhuo Qingyuan was only at the peak of the 12th layer of the Qi refinement realm and had yet to build his foundation. After that, there was no more news about him. Until today, when he asked for information about his old friend, he had already turned into ashes. This is very common in the Dawn Rain continent. We're still at the foundation building realm. When we reach the Gold Core realm and the Nascent Soul realm, we can go into seclusion for dozens of years, or even hundreds of years. Those Qi refinement and foundation building juniors, because their lifespans have come to an end, even without this sword battle, they can only see you go into seclusion. They can't see you come out. Li Zongbao looked at Xiao Hua's rueful expression and said in a low voice, "Many thanks for Brother Li's guidance." Xiao Hua took a deep breath and laughed inwardly. He often referred to himself as young master, but after careful calculation, he was probably dozens of years old now. Fortunately, young master has a face that doesn't age. Young master also has the qualifications to call himself young master. Xiao Hua encouraged himself and then asked casually, "Zhuo Qingyuan has a junior martial brother named Xiao Mao. I wonder if he's doing well in Xuanyin School?" In Xiao Hua's mind, Xiao Mao had the dragonization art, so building his foundation wouldn't be a problem. He wouldn't be sent out to Xuanyin School. Unexpectedly, a trace of astonishment appeared on Pan Hao's face. He asked curiously, "That Xiao Mao isn't Zhuo Qingyuan's junior martial brother? Could it be that he's old friends with fellow Taoist?" When I saw Xiao Mao, he was with Zhuo Qingyuan. I naturally thought that he was Zhuo Qingyuan's junior martial brother. What's his cultivation level now?" Xiao Hua said with a chuckle. "Oh, I'll let fellow Taoists know." Pan Hao didn't dare to hide and said, "Junior martial brother Xiao also went into battle with us. He was injured when he first participated in the battle, but after he recovered, his cultivation level advanced by leaps and bounds. In just a few years, he charged into the middle stage of foundation building. Right now, he's with me. Since his cultivation level broke through, why didn't he withdraw from the battle? Xiao Hua asked curiously. Fellow Taoist doesn't know. Pan Hao smiled apologetically. Xiao Mao's master is the famous gold core cultivator of my Xuanyin school, Senior Yuan Jiming. He advocated tempering one's cultivation during the battle. Therefore, although junior martial brother Xiao broke through to the middle stage of foundation building, he's still tempering himself during the battle. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua nodded. However, he immediately had a bad feeling in his heart. He suddenly asked, "What did you say just now? Xiao Mao is with you?" Then he's... Chapter 2398. Pan Hao did not understand and asked curiously, "Yes, Xiao Mao Xiao is on duty in my Xuanyin school Spirit Stone mine. In another 10 days or so, when my cultivation has recovered and the illusory swordsmen have been driven away by Martial Uncle Peng and Martial Uncle Ji, you will be able to see Xiao Mao Xiao. Quick, tell me the location of your Xuanyin school's Spirit Stone mine." Xiao Hua was anxious. He knew clearly that those were 4 illusory swordsmen. Even if there was another golden core cultivator in Xuanyin school's Spirit Stone mine, he would not be their match. Moreover, that bird cultivator's cultivation should be at the 2nd grade of illusory sword. Pang Chongtian would definitely not be his match. Pan Hao was in a difficult position. He looked at Li Zongbao and muttered, "The location of the Spirit Stone mine is my Xuanyin school's secret. Quick, tell me." Xiao Hua took a step forward and stretched out his hand. His hand grabbed Pan Hao's neck and coldly said, "I will count to 3. If you don't answer, don't think of returning to Xuanyin school alive." Xiao Mao Xiao. Li Zongbao was also shocked. He did not see how Xiao Hua attacked. Although Pan Hao was injured, he was still a foundation establishment middle stage cultivator. How could he be restrained by Xiao Hua in an instant? He had no choice but to hurriedly advise, "Xiao Mao Xiao, don't be anxious. Xuanyin School's Spirit Stone Mine may be a secret to others, but to us, it is definitely not a secret." Pan Hao was also dumbfounded. His brain had not reacted yet. Hearing Li Zongbao's advice, he hurriedly shouted, "Yes, Xiao Mao Xiao, Junior will tell you now." At this moment, Pan Hao realized that he was easily lifted off the ground by Xiao Hua. "Speak." Xiao Hua did not let go and coldly said. Pan Hao did not dare to be negligent and hurriedly transmitted the location of Xuanyin School's Spirit Stone mine. Xiao Hua loosened his hand and lowered Pan Hao down. He said in a low voice, "Excuse me." Immediately, he cupped his hands towards Li Zongbao and said, "Brother Li, I have urgent matters to attend to and need to go to the Spirit Stone mine. I will not accompany senior brother here." "All right, go ahead." When Li Zongbao heard Xiao Mao's name, he thought that Xiao Mao was related to Xiao Hua by blood, so he naturally couldn't stop him. "I've left a special communication method in your token. Moreover, after my disciples finish resting, I reckon that I'll also go to the Spirit Stone mine." "All right." Xiao Hua nodded and didn't delay any longer. He got the cultivators to open up the formation. Then he executed his flying technique and charged into midair. When he was out of the range of the cultivator's divine sense, he executed lightning flight and flew swiftly towards the Spirit Stone vein. Fellow Taoist Xiao. Only now did Pan Hao know Xiao Hua's surname. He asked Li Zongbao with lingering fear, "Is he related to Xiao Mao by blood?" Li Zongbao looked at Pan Hao and said with a smile, "I don't know either. However, I know that fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't like others discussing his origins. Since fellow Taoist Pan already knows, you should keep your mouth shut." Yes, this Pan naturally understands. Pan Hao involuntarily touched his neck and smiled apologetically. Fellow Taoist Xiao is our savior. How could this Pan not listen to his words? This Pan will... No need to say more. If others ask, you just have to answer perfunctorily. Li Zongbao said hurriedly. Yes, this Pan understands." Pan Hao's heart trembled. After cupping his hands in salute, he returned to his Xuanyin school's location. Sure enough, everyone saw the scene just now and naturally came to inquire. Pan Hao smiled bitterly and made up a story, dealing with the onlookers with great difficulty. After calming down, he understood in his heart. Xiao Huan naturally wanted to go to the Spirit Stone vein, but why? Naturally, he wanted to save Xiao Mao, but why should he save him? Why should Xiao Hua save him? Unless Xiao Hua was confident that he could block the flying sword of the illusory swordsman. Could Xiao Hua do it? Seeing how he could scare away the drawing swordsman today, Pan Hao made a judgment in his heart. As for Xiao Hua, he flew high into the sky. The sound of wind and thunder resounded. He quickly flew in the direction of the Spirit Stone vein of Xuanyin School. He had just escaped from the great formation of the Spirit Stone vein of Mount Quanjin and still had lingering fears about the cruelty of the battle for the Spirit Stone vein. It was a battle that could easily cause thousands of casualties. Moreover, from the preparations of the 4 illusory swordsmen, it was not just for the ambush here, but for the hundreds of Dao sect cultivators. What was special was that after Pang Chongtian and the others fled, they did not hesitate to abandon the hundreds of Dao sect cultivators who were fighting the enemy. They simply did not care about their lives or the results of the siege. Instead, the 4 illusory swordsmen all went to chase after Pang Chongtian. Xiao Hua thought as he flew, increasingly feeling that his guess was correct. The Dao sect cultivator's goal could really be the Spirit Stone vein of Xuanyin School. At least, that Spirit Stone vein is also one of their goals. Xiao Hua was secretly proud, but also secretly worried. As for Xiao Mao, Xiao Hua actually did not put him in the same position as Xiang Yang, Cui Hongshen, and the others. Naturally, he was behind Xiao Xinruwei and the others. That day, he helped Xiao Mao because he was a small child who fell into the trap of others. It was really pitiful. Moreover, that jade pendant was left behind by Xiao Mao's mother. No matter what, Xiao Hua had to return it to Xiao Mao. But Xiao Hua did not expect that Xiao Mao would be like him. He did not have any in-laws in this Xiaoyu continent. Especially at that time, when he wanted to cultivate some kind of cultivation technique, it was impossible for him to survive. He even treated Xiao Hua as his only family in this world. And Xiao Mao's bow and call of big brother really touched his heart. Towards this child who was in a similar situation to himself, how could Xiao Hua not have some more love? Thinking about eldest senior brother Gong Mingwei's care for him and eldest senior brother Xiang Yang's care for him, Xiao Hua felt that he must treat this big brother of his. I hope that Xiao Mao is as lucky as me. Xiao Hua urged his magic power and thought to himself, perhaps this is that trace of karma? If I can save Xiao Mao's life, so what if I don't cultivate? While flying, Xiao Hua arrived at the ice lake where the sword cultivator disciple had attacked the cultivator. Xiao Hua did not care about it all. His figure flitted past the mountain range and flew in the direction that the golden core cultivator had escaped. But at this moment, a powerful divine sense swept down from the sky. Once it swept past Xiao Hua, it immediately locked onto him. Boo! Xiao Hua's expression turned cold. His figure suddenly stopped and quietly floated in the sky. He slightly raised his head and coldly looked up. He saw a small black figure flash out from behind the clouds in the sky and quickly swoop down. When it got closer, Xiao Hua's eyes could clearly see that it was the bird cultivator who was wearing a light yellow robe and discovered his Buddhist consciousness. Seeing that bird cultivator return from the Spirit Stone mine of Xuanyin School, Xiao Hua's heart calmed down. He stroked his hand and narrowed his eyes as he watched that bird cultivator descend. The bird cultivator was thin and tall. On his withered face, his cheeks were bulging high. What was special was that his forehead was wide, taking up 30% of his face. It was also bulging high. His round eyes were not the withered yellow of an ordinary bird cultivator. Instead, they were light blue. His eyes were extremely large and almost filled his entire eyes. The old man's wings were more than 10 zhang wide. As they danced, the wind roared and small hurricanes were emitted from his wings. Although Xiao Hua was far away, he could still feel the sharp wind blades. In addition, this old man's hands were different from ordinary bird cultivators. They were thin and long. Although his 10 fingers emitted an extremely sharp light, those 10 fingers were also extremely nimble. They were like the hands of a Dao-sect cultivator who could form hand seals. The old man landed about 10 zhang away from Xiao Hua and stopped. His light blue eyes faintly flashed as if he was sizing up Xiao Hua. After a moment, the old man coldly said, "This old man is Feng Booping of the Valley of Ospreys. You are that terrifying phoenix of the Imperial Thunder Sect? This young master doesn't know who this terrifying phoenix of yours is." Xiao Hua replied, "If you want to know this young master's name, then first tell this young master about the situation of the Spirit Stone Mine in Xuanyin School." Spirit Stone Mine? Feng Booping's eyes turned slightly as he asked curiously, "That is Xuanyin School's Spirit Stone Mine. What does it have to do with your Imperial Thunder Sect? Aren't your Dao sect cultivators always scheming against each other? Why do you care about other people's Spirit Stone Mine for no reason? Then whether this young master is some terrifying phoenix or not, what does it have to do with you?" Xiao Hua's figure swayed again as he coldly said, "This young master has something to do with the Spirit Stone Mine. I don't want to kill you here. Hurry up and get out of my way." Ha ha, Feng Booping seemed to have seen the funniest thing in the world. He raised his head and laughed loudly. His slender fingers stretched out and pointed at Xiao Hua. Dao sect disciples are indeed arrogant and conceited. With your peak late-stage foundation establishment cultivation, you actually want to kill this old man? Xiao Hua was shocked. He did not expect that before they even fought, Feng Booping would see through his cultivation. You cultivators are the most cunning. Do you want to catch this old man off guard by hiding your cultivation? Feng Booping sneered. Even if you really have the lightning escape technique, under this old man's wind escape technique, only death awaits you. This old man does not believe that some terrifying phoenix can escape from this old man's palm. Wind escape technique? Xiao Hua was slightly stunned as he looked up and down at the old man. However, this old man is still somewhat curious about the whereabouts of Ling Yunwu and the others. Feng Booping spread his wings. The sound of the wind whistled again. Feng Booping's voice also became sharp. "The reason we set up an ambush here was to lure out the golden core cultivators of Xuanyin School's Spirit Stone Mine. Since that idiot has come out, can they still keep their Spirit Stone Mine?" This old man felt that something was amiss just now. When I saw that the attack was nearing its end and their great formation had collapsed, I pulled myself out and came over. This old man wasn't disappointed at all. This old man actually encountered the legendary terrifying phoenix. Tell this old man honestly, which disciple of Imperial Thunder Sect are you? Was it you who was spying on this old man earlier? Luring the snake out of its hole. Xiao Hua already understood. Moreover, listening to Feng Booping's words, there were other illusory swords among the swordsmen attacking Xuanyin School's Spirit Stone Mine. This Feng Booping had already returned for a long time, and even found the sword cultivator who was scared away by him. Xuanyin School's Spirit Stone Mine most likely had already changed owners. Xiao Mao's fate had already been decided. Whether or not he went to the Spirit Stone Mine did not have much meaning. Dozens of seemingly ordinary flying swords flew out. Feng Booping's eyes flashed and said in astonishment, They all fused with the swords? Then, Feng Booping's wings fluttered naturally, and a powerful sword technique came out from the wind. The dozens of flying swords seemed to be eager to try. In this young master's hands, you still want to leave? Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the sword pouch produced a strong suction force. All the flying swords were sucked into it. With a wave of his hand, the flying swords were sucked into the space. Old man, you are just delusional. You can actually activate the sword pouch? Seeing Xiao Hua skillfully put away the flying swords, Feng Booping's face did not turn red and said in surprise, This young master knows a lot. Xiao Hua said proudly, You will know in a while. Ha 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 ha, this old man really envies the arrogance of young people like you. Feng Buping saw that Xiao Hua was tight-lipped. Moreover, he also saw the sword pouch and the whereabouts of Ling Yunwu and the others. He did not ask about the black silk wood anymore. He clapped his hand and took out a demonic tool from his storage bag. He laughed and said, "This old man has not dared to speak arrogantly for many years. It seems that this old man really belittled himself. Today, this old man wants to see what ability this terrifying phoenix has to scare hundreds of my men away." Xiaohua saw that Feng Buping actually took out a demonic tool from his storage bag. He was stunned at first, but when he saw the appearance of the demonic tool, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. He saw that the demonic tool was as thick as a fist and 3 feet long. It was a long staff like the wishful staff. Woo! Feng Buping raised the demonic staff and waved it in the air. He spread his wings and swooped down from above. The demonic staff stirred up the spirit of heaven and earth, setting off a biting cold wind. Good, this demonic staff is really powerful. Xiaohua saw Feng Buping's demonic staff attack. A suffocating aura mixed with the unique blood smell of this demonic tool smashed down like a mountain. He could not help but secretly click his tongue. This kind of close combat was the weakness of a cultivator. Even a swordsman was afraid of it. If this staff fell, it was really not something a cultivator of the late Gold Core stage could withstand. Go! How could Xiao Hua be afraid of the tricks he was good at? He only saw that he pointed his finger and urged his spiritual power. The suppressing cloud seal hummed and rushed over quickly. A yellow light flashed, and several clouds fell from the suppressing cloud seal, blocking in front of the demonic staff. Ga, Feng Buping laughed and waved his wings. Countless wind blades were born from mid-air like knives and flying swords, hit the clouds and the suppressing cloud seal. At the same time, the demonic staff still fell. Z. Like the sound of water dripping into a pot of oil, several clouds were torn apart by the wind blades. The demonic staff had not fallen, but the wind on it scattered the clouds. Good, this old man really has the ability to boast. Xiaohua at this time urged the suppressing cloud seal, but he used nearly 60% of his spiritual power. He could almost use the damage suppressing cloud seal. In this case, Feng Buping broke through the clouds. That Feng Buping really did not have the strength of a second-grade illusory sword. Chapter 2400. Luo. Since Xiaohua had already used the cloud-suppressing seal, he might as well not change to other treasures. With a slap of his hand, the cloud-suppressing seal suddenly expanded, and another dozen clouds fell down. This time, the clouds were already several zhang in size. Feng Buping sneered. His wings flapped slightly, and another few hundred wind blades fell down, and his devil staff fell on the continuous clouds. Woo! With a whimper, the devil staff hit the clouds, and it was like hitting a quagmire. Feng Buping felt an extremely strong confinement force from the clouds. Break! Feng Buping sneered. At this moment, the wind blades arrived again. Like a sharp cone, they spun and pierced through the dozen clouds. Under the heavy attack of the devil's staff, the clouds were scattered again. Is this all the horrifying phoenix can do? Feng Buping sneered. Hee, I'm happy to do so. Xiaohua laughed. He knew that this guy was a bird cultivator and wanted to fight with his phoenix dharma body. However, Xiaohua had many ways to kill this guy. So why did he have to use the phoenix dharma body? As he spoke, Xiaohua pointed his finger, and it was still the cloud-suppressing seal. Wung. Once again, the gale snowfield's cold, earth element spiritual energy madly condensed, and on top of the cloud-suppressing seal, traces of jade appeared. Oh! Feng Buping's eyes narrowed, and he sneered. A damaged treasure was actually used by you to this extent. It's really not bad. As expected of the horrifying phoenix. Don't mention the horrifying phoenix all the time. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and he secretly said, I'm afraid that the name provoked this guy. He must fight with me to see who's better. As Feng Buping said that, his hands and feet were not satisfied. The devil staff in his hand danced again, and with a momentum of burning the sky, he attacked the cloud-suppressing seal from bottom to top. I'll let you have a taste of the cloud-suppressing seal. Xiao Hua roared, and his magic power surged. The cloud-suppressing seal whistled, and with a strong confinement force, it smashed down. Quang Deng, the devil staff, and the cloud-suppressing seal collided. The cloud-suppressing seal was knocked into the air, and the demonic staff was also knocked down a few feet by the cloud-suppressing seal. Feng Buping's figure was also somewhat unstable and fell down. Fight! This time, Feng Buping was a little embarrassed and angry. As he flapped his wings, no wind blades appeared again. He waved his demon staff and hit the seal of the cloud. Tsk Tisk, seeing Feng Buping so arrogant, Xiao Hua was slightly disdainful. However, Xiao Hua was also proud of his own magic treasure. He rubbed his hands together and didn't use any other spells. Instead, he used his mana to raise the seal of suppressing cloud high up in the air. It emitted a light that was dozens of feet wide and once again smashed towards Feng Buping. Good timing. Feng Buping's eyes were wide open, and there was a flash of light in his light blue eyes. At the same time, there was a buzzing sound around his body, and a layer of light shone on his body. Dang, the cloud-suppressing seal fell, and the magic wand also struck out. A thunderous sound rang out in the air, and this sound traveled extremely far. Oh, Xiao Hua was slightly surprised. He had a bad feeling in his heart because this time, the seal of suppressing cloud didn't suffer any losses. Not only did it not fly away, but it also fell a few inches. However, Feng Buping's magic wand was also not struck down. It only slightly reverberated. What shocked Xiao Hua the most was that Feng Buping's magic wand hit where the seal of suppressing cloud was damaged. Sure enough, after the magic wand reverberated, Feng Buping actually used the impact of the seal of suppressing cloud to fight force with force. A shadow appeared on the magic wand. Dang, 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 a series of sounds rang out. Feng Buping actually used the same method as Xiao Hua. He actually hit the seal of suppressing cloud 7 or 8 times in a row. Damn you! Xiao Hua was furious. He waved his hand, and the seal of suppressing cloud fell back into his hand. Looking at the shrunken seal of suppressing cloud and the deep cracks on it, Xiao Hua wanted to cry, but had no tears. This was his best technique, and now it was used against him by Feng Buping. The seal of suppressing cloud was not completely repaired. This crack was repaired by Xiao Hua last time at the Zhongling Villa. If it cracked again, it would not be of much use. I want to see, what other great skills do you have? Xiao Hua decided to just smash the pot. He urged the mana in his hand. The seal of suppressing cloud bloomed with an unusual light, but it did not expand. Go! Xiao Hua stretched out his arm and used all his strength. Holding the seal of suppressing cloud, he smashed it towards Feng Buping like a stone. Ha ha ha! Seeing Xiao Hua like this, Feng Buping laughed. Little thing, you dare to show off in front of me with that broken magic weapon. However, just as he finished speaking, the seal of suppressing cloud fell like a meteor, aiming at his forehead. The sound of the wind above the seal of suppressing cloud and the mana it contained was truly shocking. Xiao Hua could not help but become alert. He quickly flapped his wings, and the light around him flashed again and again. The magic wand also danced again, striking towards the seal of suppressing cloud. Boom! There was a loud sound, as if the light had exploded. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth also suddenly scattered, violently attacking in all directions. Even the ice under Xiao Hua and Feng Buping's feet had a thick crack from the impact. Jie! Feng Buping's mouth let out a strong roar. His body continuously rolled, like a bald chicken that had its feathers ripped off. His body fell for more than 10 zhong, and his magic wand was also trembling at an extreme speed. That trembling even affected Feng Buping's entire arm, and that entire arm was also slightly trembling. Xiao Hua's seal of suppressing cloud was also sent flying. Like the rising sun, it flashed with a brilliant brilliance and rushed into the sky. Haha, Xiao Hua's body flew up. With a wave of his hand, the seal of suppressing cloud fell into his hand. However, the current seal of suppressing cloud was almost completely damaged. That deep crack once again appeared on the seal of suppressing cloud, and it was even worse than before. It was almost as if the entire seal of suppressing cloud was split into two. Feng Buping's face was somewhat unsightly. His wings flapped and flew into the air. Looking at the seal of suppressing cloud in Xiao Hua's hand, he coldly said, "Dao Sect's cultivators all rely on magic treasures. Now that your life magic treasure has been damaged to this extent, do you still dare to use it again?" Haha, Xiao Hua laughed loudly. "I originally didn't want to use this magic treasure again. You breaking this magic treasure is just what I wanted. I still have to thank you." Saying that, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and the seal of suppressing cloud was sent into the space. Xiao Hua's words were not wrong. His current spiritual energy was close to the late gold core stage. However, the seal of suppressing cloud was a damaged magic treasure. It was simply not enough to unleash Xiao Hua's spiritual energy. However, this magic treasure was Xiao Hua's first magic treasure. The nostalgic Xiao Hua was always reluctant to give it up and always wanted to repair it. However, today's battle with Feng Buping made him truly see that the seal of suppressing cloud was no longer suitable for him. If he did not have a real magic treasure, his spiritual energy could not be unleashed. Rather than that, he might as well break it off and let Feng Buping destroy the seal of suppressing cloud. Oh, Feng Buping knew that Xiao Hua was cunning. How could he believe it? However, right now his arms were sore and numb. He really did not have the strength to do so. So he took advantage of the situation to rest. He coldly said, "This old man wants to see what other magic treasures you have. What other tricks you have." "Tricks?" Xiao Hua laughed. It was really a happy laugh. "Are you sure you want to see my tricks?" "What?" "A little brat in the late foundation establishment stage. What other tricks do you have?" Feng Buping's eyes flashed, as if he was using some secret technique to check Xiao Hua. "All right, then this young master will let you see." Xiao Hua's figure swayed, and the sound of wind and thunder rumbled around him. An afterimage flashed, rushing towards Feng Buping. Ha! Feng Buping's wings flapped, and his body also swayed with afterimages. In an instant, he flew away from his original position. It was actually not much worse than Xiao Hua's Imperial Thunder Travel. Oh, Xiao Hua was really shocked. He did not expect Feng Buping's wind escape to be at this level. Haha, little thing, you have to know that there is always someone better than you. Your Imperial Thunder Sect's thunder escape is indeed powerful, but in front of this old man, it is really not worth mentioning. Feng Buping laughed crazily, and then his face revealed a trace of self-mockery. This old man, too, I really did not expect. There are still many things that you can't imagine. Xiao Hua also sneered. His figure swayed, and he used wind escape. Moreover, he used ethereal steps again. Wind? Wind escape. You also know this. Feng Buping was completely stunned. Xiao Hua's figure was even more agile. A series of afterimages appeared in the air, and he closed in on Feng Buping. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Feng Buping was shocked. His wings flapped, and he also flew. However, after flying for a few feet, Feng Buping laughed. Haha, this old man is wrong. Why should I escape? The one who should escape is you. At this moment, Xiao Hua's spirit thorn suddenly launched. Moreover, Xiao Hua clapped his hands, and a golden light flashed, and it cut towards Feng Buping's wings. Oh! Feng Buping's face slightly showed a trace of astonishment. It seemed that he was interested, and the expression on his face was a bit strange. However, the expression on his face was definitely not what Xiao Hua imagined pain. Oh no, Xiao Hua thought to himself. Indeed, the extremely uncomfortable feeling came from his Buddha Saraira. Even the Buddha Saraira was faintly glowing with golden light. Spirit Thorn actually backfired. However, this was not the worst situation. The golden light of the tongue Jiao shears had already cut towards Feng Buping's wings. However, Feng Buping's wings flashed rapidly, and his figure was extremely agile. At the same time, hundreds and thousands of wind blades violently rotated, blocking the tongue Jiao shears. The sharp tongue Jiao shears was blocked in the air. Ha 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 ha, Feng Buping laughed loudly. Little bastard, you really have a lot of tricks. However, you seem to have forgotten that this old man and the other swordsmen of the sword region, which one of us has not fought with soul cultivators? This thing of yours that can deal with divine sense might be effective against ordinary swordsmen, but against this old man. Your magic weapon is tongue Jiao shears? Feng Buping laughed wildly. When he saw the tongue Jiao shears blocked by the wind blades, his face showed ecstasy. You know the tongue Jiao shears? Xiaohua was overjoyed, but also shocked. He even had a bad feeling again. Ha ha ha, today is really a surprise for this old man. Not only can I kill the terrifying phoenix, I can also get the other tongue Jiao shears. The other tongue Jiao shears? Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. He waved his hand, and the tongue Jiao shears flew back to his hand. He asked, "Where's the other tongue Jiao shears?" Woo! How could Feng Buping answer his question? He clapped his hand, and a strange talisman appeared in his hand. He activated his sword, Origin, and the talisman flashed with a faint golden light. It was exactly the same as the tongue Jiao shears. As the light flashed, the talisman flew into the air and turned into the shape of the tongue Jiao shears. It flew towards the tongue Jiao shears in Xiaohua's hand. Since Feng Buping's talisman was used, Xiaohua felt that the tongue Jiao shears had a tendency to break away from his divine sense control. When the talisman turned into the tongue Jiao shears, Xiaohua's control over the tongue Jiao shears completely disappeared. The tongue Jiao shears changed direction and went straight toward the talisman. Not good. Xiaohua was anxious. Since when did someone snatch a magic weapon from his hand? It was already good enough that he did not snatch other people's magic weapons. Xiaohua used wind escape and ethereal steps again and rushed towards the tongue Jiao shears. Fight! Seeing this, Feng Buping was overjoyed. He flapped his wings again, and the devil's staff mercilessly attacked Xiaohua's arm. The talisman was very close to the tongue Jiao shears. In the blink of an eye, the two would become one. As long as the talisman landed on the tongue Jiao shears, the tongue Jiao shears would definitely fall into Feng Buping's hands. Moreover, Feng Buping's devil staff would attack again. If Xiaohua wanted to get the tongue Jiao shears, he would inevitably be hit by the devil staff. Xiaohua, it seemed that he would not be able to take back the tongue Jiao shears. In this impossible moment, Xiaohua's left hand shook and Universe Creator was used. The talisman and the tongue Jiao shears were both shrouded by the power of Universe Creator. However, in just a moment, the talisman emitted an extremely bright light and was about to break free from the power of Universe Creator. Xiaohua also wanted this moment. His left hand followed his body and reached into the talisman, landing right under Feng Buping's devil staff. He grabbed the tongue Jiao shears. Feng Buping's face showed a grin, as if he had already seen Xiaohua's left hand being crushed by his devil staff. But Feng Buping was disappointed. Just as the magic staff approached Xiaohua's left arm, a black staff as thick as a duck egg appeared in Xiaohua's right hand. It blocked Feng Buping's left arm. Dang! Feng Buping's magic staff hit the black staff. That black staff was like a cast of copper and iron. It didn't move at all. Feng Buping was really not as shocked as he was today. Xiaohua's means were absolutely endless, far beyond his imagination. This is also a devil tool. Even at this time, Feng Buping did not expect that his full blow could not even move Xiaohua's wishful staff half an inch. Xiaohua sneered. It was not easy to have some confidence in his heart. This Feng Buping was definitely the most difficult person to deal with besides the nascent soul stage cultivators. But at this time, just as his hand was about to touch the tongue Jiao shears, the talisman produced a strong suction force. The tongue Jiao Shears slipped under Xiao Hua's hand and was about to go out of his palm. Keep! Xiao Hua suddenly thought of the Dharma eye in his left hand. His heart moved, and the Dharma eye immediately opened. A silver brilliance sprinkled down and covered the tongue Jiao Shears. The tongue Jiao Shears that was covered by the silver light immediately became obedient and did not move. Xiao Hua's heart was happy. He waved his hand and immediately put the tongue Jiao Shears into the space. When the tongue Jiao Shears disappeared, the talisman that turned into the tongue Jiao Shears suddenly rushed up. The wishful staff in his hand danced slightly on his wrist, drawing a subtle arc, eliminating the force on Foam Booping's staff. He immediately shouted, and the wind escaped and ethereal steps rushed out again. The wishful staff was held high, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth was split into two halves by the wishful staff. Although there was no brilliance flashing above the staff, there was an incomparable, suffocating chill that covered the protruding forehead of Foam Booping. It was as if in an instant, the wishful staff could cut through space and hit Foam Booping. Foam Booping did not want to be surprised anymore, but he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Today he had sucked in too much cold air. He had always thought highly of himself, especially his strength and wishful staff. Not only did he have few opponents in the sword domain, but he also took advantage of the soul cultivators. However, as he said, in this world, there was always someone better than him. Xiao Hua's strength. Xiao Hua's wishful staff were completely better than his. More than that, Foam Booping looked at his wishful staff that was slightly bent and estimated in horror. He watched as Xiao Hua once again pounced forward with ease. It was as if that strike just now was merely a warm-up. Wong, just as Xiao Hua pounced, Foam Booping's body suddenly flashed with a light blue brilliance, and following the appearance of the brilliance, there was also a kind of obscure fluctuation. Oh! Xiao Hua's eyes suddenly lit up, and he sneered, "Old man, eat this young master's staff. At this time, don't you think it's too late to use any secret technique?" Ha ha! Foam Booping's figure in the brilliance seemed to be blurred, and an extremely arrogant voice came from the brilliance. "Little bastard, I really did not expect that this old man would be forced into such a situation by you. But it's also good, if you did not have such strength, how could you be called the terrifying phoenix? At this time, in the Tao sect, only you, the terrifying phoenix, are worthy of this old man using all his means." Oh, not good. Just as Foam Booping sneered, Xiao Hua's figure had already closed in. However, the fluctuation contained a great force that blocked Xiao Hua's path. If Xiao Hua wanted to get closer, he would have to break through this force. Thinking that Foam Booping's secret technique was so powerful, Xiao Hua could not help but feel that this was not good. Sure enough, just as Xiao Hua was pondering whether or not to destroy this power, the ripples rapidly shrank, and the light blue brilliance also converged. The ripples retreated into Foam Booping's body, and the brilliance covered Foam Booping's body. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed, and his two pupils constricted. His heart was shocked. Transforming into a sword? That's right, Xiao Hua cannot be sure. But at this time, Foam Booping had already transformed into a spirit bird similar to a white goose. And the strange thing was that this spirit bird's neck was not as long as the white goose's neck, and the place where the goose's webs were still Foam Booping's arms. Of course, if Xiao Hua had seen the battle between Xianwan and Dongshan Yi, he would have realized that this spirit bird was somewhat similar to Xianwan's body. But now Xiao Hua did not have time to think too much, because Foam Booping's cultivator's aura was constantly rising, and it had far surpassed the late gold core stage and was approaching the nascent soul stage. This aura was even more powerful than a cultivator's aura, and it actually stirred the heaven and earth spiritual energy within a dozen miles. And even in the sky, the wind and clouds were changing. This bastard's secret technique actually caused the weather to change. Xiao Hua's heart was bitter, and he felt that the hurricane within a dozen miles was gradually going crazy, and that extremely cold and fierce wind blade was actually born within a dozen miles. Moreover, that aura directly wrapped around Xiaohua, and although it had not made any move, Xiaohua did not doubt that Feng Buping's aura could turn into a big hand and grab him. Run, Xiaohua saw that Feng Buping was so powerful, and he immediately made a decision in his heart, giving up the idea of killing him. His figure swayed, and the sound of wind and thunder resounded from his body, and he used the imperial lightning travel and fled into the distance. However, Xiaohua had just flown for a dozen feet when he suddenly realized that this space was different from before. Countless hurricanes surrounded him, and it actually seemed like a quagmire. His imperial lightning sect was actually similar to the hibernating lightning escape. Xiaohua had already discovered it, and without hesitation, he immediately changed to the wind escape. The wind escape was already used, and as expected, his speed greatly increased, and he instantly escaped more than 100 feet away. But Xiaohua's heart did not have any joy, because he knew that his wind escape was probably not as good as Feng Buping's. Sure enough, Xiaohua escaped for another dozen feet, and then he could no longer fly. That wind seemed to be completely stagnant, as if it was completely unable to be used by him. Ha ha! Feng Buping's wild laughter actually sounded in front of Xiaohua, and Feng Buping actually flew in front of Xiaohua without anyone noticing. The spirit bird under the light blue brilliance already had the aura of an early nascent soul stage. Little bastard, are you very scared? Feng Buping's voice was somewhat sharp and hoarse, completely unlike the voice of a human just now. And this old man knows you are very surprised. Could it be you think that in this Xiaoyu continent, only you know how to conceal your cultivation base? Could it be that only you have so many secret techniques? Xiaohua stood there coldly, and the wishful staff protected his body. After Feng Buping finished speaking, he suppressed his panic and fear, and tried to calm down and said, "This matter is really beyond this Zhao's expectations. I didn't think that you were actually a sword transformation realm beast cultivator. Since you are a sword transformation realm senior, you have to be so thick-skinned to bully this Zhao, a late foundation establishment realm cultivator? This old man is really a third-grade illusory sword cultivator," Feng Buping proudly said, "but in order to keep you here, I had to forcibly raise my cultivation base to the sword transformation realm. Little bastard, you a late foundation establishment realm cultivator, actually forced this old man to do this. You can also be proud. Senior, do you really want to keep this little one's life?" Xiaohua still had a trace of luck in his heart, even if this little one gives the tongue jiao shears and other things to Senior. Hearing Xiaohua's soft tone, and actually called him Senior, Feng Buping was happy, and he flapped his wings and said, "Since things have come to this old man will not hide it from you. That tongue jiao shears is what a senior wants. Whether you give it or not, this old man doesn't mind. But you have forced this old man to such a situation. How can this old man let you go? You don't want others to know your secret. This old man also does. If you had said such a thing before this old man used the secret technique, this old man can really consider it." Xiaohua smiled bitterly, before he still wanted to kill the other party. How could he surrender? At this time, even if Feng Buping really wanted to let him go, he himself would not dare to believe it. If you know what's good for you, then don't do it again. Feng Buping chuckled. Obediently let this old man search your soul, see how many secret techniques you have. Then this old man will let your soul go. I will not let your soul be destroyed. Ha ha, old man. This young master was joking with you. You really took it seriously. Although Xiaohua's heart was trembling, how could he lose face? Even if it was a quarrel, he did not want to lose. While speaking, he waved the staff and shouted, "Eat this young master's staff." "Xiaohua, you have really become a joke," Feng Buping said coldly. "Can you move? You just wait and see how this old man will deal with you." Immediately, Feng Buping's wings flapped, and the hurricane around Xiaohua gradually gathered. Sure enough, as Xiaohua thought, like a big hand, Xiao Hua squeezed over, and the power of Feng Buping's body also pressed down tightly like a pressure. Rise! Xiao Hua knew that he could not release the phoenix celestial body. He shrugged his shoulders, and the phoenix celestial body flew out of his body. With a GA sound, the imposing manner of looking down on the world unstoppably bloomed and blocked the power of Feng Buping that was close to the nascent soul stage. Moreover, the wings of nearly 400 feet spread out, and it was even more comparable to Feng Buping, who was 10 feet in size. Seeing Xiao Hua's phoenix celestial body spread out its wings, and countless tiny thunder lights lingered around the phoenix celestial body. Feng Buping was a little dumbfounded, and the previous arrogance of victory was even more gone. He listened to the oral narration of the drawing swordsman, but he always felt that it was not possible and that it was unnecessary exaggeration by others. When he really saw it, especially when he saw the silver in the eyes of the phoenix celestial body and the faint planet in the silver, he knew that he was wrong. Not only did the drawing swordsman not exaggerate, they even said that it was too small because they did not know the true strength of Xiao Hua's phoenix celestial body. To be able to help a foundation establishment cultivator resist the power of the nascent soul stage. How could this celestial body be simple? But then, a trace of greed flashed in Feng Buping's eyes. He was very clear about the potential and role of this phoenix celestial body. If he could get the true phoenix blood in Xiao Hua's body, he could cultivate such a phoenix celestial body. Then his cultivation, the greed in Feng Buping's eyes became more and more fervent. Kacha, above a burst of thunder, not only did it flash within 100 feet, but it also condensed within 100 feet and completely shattered the wind blades that wanted to press down on Xiao Hua. Take this! Xiao Hua roared, and the thunder escape technique was displayed again. His figure followed the flashing thunder and lightning, and rushed towards Feng Buping like a flash of lightning. Ha! Feng Buping laughed, and the magic staff in his hand also swayed. His wings flashed, and a faint blue light flashed on the magic staff. Together with the light blue on his arm and wrist, he attacked Xiao Hua. Bang! There was a loud noise, and at the same time, there were countless airflows from the collision of the two. Ayo! Xiao Hua roared, and it seemed that he was extremely happy. His whole body turned a few times in midair, and suddenly his body grew again. The wishful steel staff appeared in front of Feng Buping's forehead. Bang, bang, bang! Feng Buping saw this and sneered. The dark magic staff was swung and danced. Why would Xiao Hua be afraid of him? The heavenly staff technique was like a whirlwind, and in a breath, the magic staff and the wishful steel staff had already collided more than 10 times. Words were already unable to describe the danger and power of the stab. If there were bystanders by the side, they would certainly be fascinated. Both of them had good staff techniques and great strength. One was like a flood dragon coming out of the sea. The other was like a fierce tiger coming down from the mountain. One staff shadows were like mountains and ridges, while the other staff shadows were like waves and tides. Not to mention that the heaven and earth spirit chi within 100 miles had been completely stirred up, causing the surrounding snow to be blown into the air by the wind and clouds. Even the layer of ice on the frozen lake had been completely shattered by the staff, turning into several feet of ice. Under the layer of ice that was more than 100 feet thick, the azure lake water was also surging. Waves surged violently towards the sky, displaying the heaven-defying almighty abilities of a bird cultivator and a human cultivator. Refreshing, refreshing. Xiao Hua fought fiercely, and the mood that had been suppressed was released freely. For a moment, his body was light, and his spirit was flying. He shouted loudly, and the wishful steel staff in his hand was really like an ancient great weapon. This guy, on the other hand, Feng Buping had reached an unexpected limit. The light blue brilliance on his body flashed incessantly, and from time to time, he turned his spiritual power and his strength to meet Xiao Hua's staff. He really did not know what Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff was. His magic staff was already the heaviest staff he could find, but obviously, Xiao Hua's wishful staff was several times or even dozens of times heavier than his magic staff. Moreover, he knew that he must not be hit by this wishful staff. If he was hit by the wishful staff, not to mention that he was an animal cultivator who had been tempered thousands of times, not to mention that his cultivation base was comparable to that of a sword. Even if he was hit by the wishful staff, he would still be smashed into pieces. Bang, another blow. Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff was like an arm from his crotch, and it went straight to Feng Buping's forehead. Feng Buping blocked in panic, and his left hand was abnormally sore and numb. I can't go on like this. Feng Buping realized that he had fallen into Xiao Hua's trap. Xiao Hua's strength seemed to be endless, but Feng Buping's own spiritual power was not endless. Feng Buping turned around, and his figure flew high into the air. He opened his mouth, and a light blue ball of light, smaller than a goose egg, flew out. As soon as the ball of light appeared, its strength set off endless wind and waves. It seemed that the spiritual power of heaven and earth within a dozen miles had a life of its own, and it happily flew toward this ball of light. Inner core, Xiao Hua saw that the spiritual power of heaven and earth could not be controlled, and a hint of understanding flashed in his eyes. The phoenix celestial body let out a long cry, and the flashing lightning phoenix claws suddenly danced. At this time, in the sky, the red clouds were deep, and the surrounding 100 miles were tightly covered. In the dark and thick clouds, various colors of lightning were faintly moving. Kachacha, a burst of heavenly thunder sounded, and with a wave of the phoenix claws, the heavenly thunder that had been brewing for a long time rumbled and struck, striking toward Feng Buping, toward the inner core, and also toward the wind blades that were condensing within a dozen miles. Xiao Hua was not idle. His figure flew up again, and the wishful steel staff was raised high, and once again struck toward Feng Buping. This guy's phoenix celestial body seems to be different from ordinary celestial bodies. Feng Buping noticed a trace of abnormality. When ordinary cultivators used the celestial body secret technique, they could no longer use other techniques, and the celestial body of ordinary cultivators could not be more than a few feet away from their physical body. But Xiao Hua's celestial body not only attacked Feng Buping from a high altitude, but also from more than 200 feet away from Xiao Hua. What made Feng Buping even more alarmed was that the phoenix celestial body was simply like another beast cultivator, independently using the thunder-attracting technique, easily controlling the heavenly thunder, and using the lightning as an instrument to strike his most powerful reliance, the wind bead. Fortunately, Feng Buping was a beast cultivator comparable to the nascent soul stage, and his primordial spirit also had its own uniqueness. While most of his primordial spirit concentrated on resisting Xiao Hua's attacks, a small part of his primordial spirit could also control the wind bead. But seeing the rolling wind blades stabbing toward the phoenix celestial body from more than 10 miles away, the extremely sharp blade not only made a chi-chi sound in the air, but also slightly flashed with a grayish-black color. The void was pierced by the wind blades, but no matter how powerful the wind blades were, they could not be compared to the heavenly thunder. The phoenix celestial body was like the god of thunder, surrounded by lightning, and was incomparably majestic. The phoenix celestial body was like a rock in the storm, majestic and unmoving in the sea of wind blades. Another phoenix cry resounded through the world, and hundreds of heavenly thunder roared down from the sky. Not only were the wind blades within a few miles completely shattered, but even Feng Buping's wind bead was also hit until its brilliance dimmed and slightly shrunk. On the other hand, Feng Buping was in an even more pathetic state. Lightning flashed on his wings like maggots that could not be removed. The lightning not only penetrated Feng Buping's sword yuan, it also penetrated deep into his mortal body and struck his meridians. Let's do it again. At this moment, Xiao Hua shouted again, and the wishful staff swept across. The sound of the sweeping wind was much stronger than before, and there were also ripples at the head of the staff. Feng Buping did not dare to neglect. He only needed to prevent him from jumping over the wall like a rabbit, and he would definitely be able to kill him. Fight! Seeing Feng Buping waving his magic staff, Xiaohua also raised his wishful staff to meet it, and the phoenix celestial body on the side of Feng Buping also waved its claws, and more than a dozen lightning bolts were drawn down from the sky by the celestial body. Dang! The two collided, and Feng Buping's strength was obviously declining, and Xiaohua effortlessly sent Feng Buping flying. Seeing that Feng Buping was also retreating in the direction of the phoenix celestial body, Xiaohua frowned slightly, puzzled. Could it be that this guy still has some tricks up his sleeve? Thinking about it, the phoenix celestial body's lightning struck Feng Buping, blocking Feng Buping's further approach. Ah! Feng Buping screamed, and the lightning around his body shone brightly, and in the dazzling lightning, the light blue brilliance bloomed with the lightning. Ouch! A palpitating feeling suddenly emerged from Xiao Hua's karma hand. Xiao Hua was shocked, and his figure hurriedly retreated, and the phoenix celestial body also flapped its wings, preparing to fly away. It was just that the phoenix celestial body was more than 400 feet, and just as the wind and lightning stirred, the brilliance around Feng Buping's body rapidly shrank, and his body of more than 10 feet also rapidly collapsed, and in a flash, it turned into a ball of thumb size. After the thumb-sized brilliance was annihilated, it turned into a ball of gray, and that gray color quickly rotated, gradually turning into black and white. And when the black and white colors were born, a strong suction force was born from the black and white colors. With the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the surrounding 3,000 feet rushed into the black and white. Along with this hurricane, everything within 3,000 feet, whether it was snow, ice, or green lake water, was lifted up and rushed into the black and white. This is a space crack? Xiao Hua suddenly realized. Feng Buping, this old man actually risked his life to tear open a space crack? He only has the strength of a sword. How is it possible? But Xiao Hua already had no time to think. That irresistible suction force had already torn his phoenix celestial body, and one of the phoenix celestial body's wings had already been pulled into the black and white space crack. And at this time, that space crack had already shrunk to the size of Pinky. I only need to hold on until this crack closes. Xiao Hua turned around and used the thunder riding technique, pouring all the spiritual energy in his body into it. He understood that as long as he rushed out of the tear of this space crack, the phoenix celestial body would naturally fly away with him. However, he had fought with Feng Buping for a long time. How much spiritual energy was left in his body? Although he tried his best to fly out and fight against the suction force of the space crack, he could only ensure that he was not sucked in. As for escaping from the suction of this space crack, it could only be said to be a dream. Chapter 24:01. The Phoenix Avatar let out a mournful cry. Half of the Avatar was already pulled into the space crack. The lightning from the Phoenix's claws were all thrown into the space crack. It was completely useless. What should I do now? Xiao Hua tightly clenched his teeth and tried his best to absorb the Phoenix Avatar back into his body. However, his magic power was simply too weak under the power of space. It was even weaker than that of an infant. The Phoenix Avatar let out a final cry. The remaining half of the Avatar was quickly stretched out and was sucked into the space crack like a bird returning to its nest. At this time, the space crack was only the size of a grain of rice. However, the suction force was actually doubled. Xiao Hua's body was also involuntarily sucked back. Xiao Hua did not dare to be negligent. He slapped his hand and threw a green spirit pill into his mouth. A surge of magic power was produced from his meridians. Roar! The dragon transformation art suddenly revolved. The heaven infusion technique also poured the remaining spiritual energy of heaven and earth into his body, forcefully slowing down Xiao Hua's speed. A whistling sound that was even louder than a dragon's roar came from midair. An incomparably huge force that, even if Xiao Hua's cultivation was 10 times higher, he would not be able to resist pulled Xiao Hua towards the direction of the whistling sound. It's over. Xiao Hua was completely disheartened. Whoosh! Just when Xiao Hua's figure was being pulled out of shape and was about to fall into the spatial crack, at this critical moment, the whistling sound suddenly stopped, and the enormous suction force also stopped abruptly. Xiao Hua's body shot up into the sky like a sharp arrow. That space crack, the space crack that Feng Buping used the secret technique of life to tear open, disappeared. Phew! Xiao Hua let out a long sigh of relief. A kind of joy of rebirth filled his chest. He somersaulted a dozen times in midair before stopping in midair. What a pity for my phoenix avatar. I was actually tricked by that bastard Feng Buping and actually fell into the space crack. Xiao Hua calmed down slightly and stood in midair. However, being able to keep my life is better than anything else. Immediately after, Xiao Hua sensed the primordial spirit that merged with the phoenix avatar. There was no trace of it at all. I wonder where the phoenix avatar fell. Damn it, looks like I have to take a look at that magic bamboo slip when I have the time. Space crack. Feng Buping, that guy, had just forcefully raised his cultivation base to the level of sword transformation. How could he tear the space apart? What kind of secret technique is this guy using? Thinking of Feng Buping's secret technique, Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. This time, we really suffered a big loss. Feng Buping's body is completely gone, and his storage bag is nowhere to be seen. I'm afraid that it fell into the space crack along with this damn thing. His secret technique is naturally untraceable. I even lost my Dharma body. Sigh, my Dharmakaya. How am I going to explain this to Fairy Hong Xia? Soon after, Xiao Hua's figure descended from the sky. At this moment, the entire ice lake was in an abnormal mess. Not only was the entire ice lake completely gone, even the huge crater in the middle looked as if it had been hacked by countless giant axes. Also, the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a dozen li had been sucked away by the space crack. The surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was like a gale blowing over. It was like the wind was swirling and the clouds were constantly changing. Sigh, Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over and did not find any trace of Feng Buping's storage bag. He could not help but feel disappointed. Just as he was about to fly away, his eyes lit up again. He saw that on the distant stone wall, a fist-sized black spot had appeared within the green mountain. Magic staff, damn it. At least there is some compensation. Xiao Hua flew over and reached out his hand to pull out Feng Buping's magic staff from the stone wall. This magic staff was actually not sucked away by the suction force of the space crack. How lucky! Immediately after, Xiao Hua did not hesitate to put it into the space. He carefully looked around and made sure that there was nothing left behind. Only then did he immediately activate his remaining spiritual energy and flew towards the direction of Xuanyin School's Spirit Stone Mine. The talisman that wanted to take away the Tung Jiao shears had already flown away. Who knew when the owner of the talisman would come? One Feng Buping almost caused Xiao Hua to fall into the space crack. If that person came, what good would Xiao Hua have? After Xiao Hua flew away, another 10 days passed. A faint golden light flew over from the north, swaying as it arrived. When it flew to the original ice lake, it immediately stopped. An extremely cold divine sense swept down, directly looking at the surrounding 10 li immediately. That golden light made another turn and flew towards the west. From start to finish, that golden light did not disperse, and there was no way to see the appearance of the person inside the golden light. Xiao Hua, after escaping from Feng Buping's calamity, used the hibernating thunder escape and flew towards Xuanyin School's Spirit Stone Mine. He flew while taking medicinal pills, trying his best to recover his spiritual energy. After waiting for a day, he arrived at an even colder place. 10 li away from Xiao Hua, there was a huge ice lake. This ice lake was 10 times larger than the ice lake where Xiao Hua fought with Feng Buping. At this time, this ice lake had the same appearance as the previous ice lake. All the ice layers in lake water had disappeared, directly revealing the deep bottom of the lake. It was as if the woman in the same dress had all the barriers removed. All the secrets at the bottom of the lake were also revealed. Similar to the Spirit Stone mine at Golden Spring Mountain, there were many caves and many veins that were deeply engraved at various places at the bottom of the lake, crisscrossing. Of course, at this time, the bottom of the lake was in a mess. The flames, the smoke, the traces of magical weapons, the scattered bloodstains, and the corpses that were not completely collected all showed how tragic the previous battle was. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over, only to see that within the Spirit Stone mine, it was already completely under the control of sword cultivators. Groups after groups of sword cultivators slowly searched the bottom of the lake, as if they were looking for surviving swordsmen. There were also some swordsmen escorting captured and injured cultivators, entering the Spirit Stone mine. The ones closest to Xiao Hua were some 6th-grade swordsmen that flew several hundred zhang away from the Spirit Stone mine. Yes, at this time within the Spirit Stone mine, there is only 1 2nd-grade illusory swordsman and over 1,000 drawn swordsmen. As for the captured cultivators, I don't know how many. Xiao Hua concealed himself in midair, inwardly pondering. If I want to obtain news of Xiao Mao, I still need to find that captured cultivator, or wait for the swordsman to gather all the cultivator corpses together. At this time, Xiao Hua's magic power was exhausted. He did not want to rashly cause trouble. After thinking for a moment, he found a nearby cave to hide in and took an azure spirit pill. When the morning of the 2nd day arrived, he felt that his magic power had recovered by more than half. Only then did he open his eyes, escape out of the cave, and fly above the ice lake. When he was near the patrolling sword cultivators, Xiao Hua used a concealment technique to conceal his tracks, and secretly flew into the Spirit Stone mine. After a night of rest, the Spirit Stone mine was already a lot cleaner. Many cultivator corpses were gathered together, waiting for a unified destruction. Xiao Hua slightly wrinkled his brows. Carefully looking over the corpses, he did not see any that resembled Xiao Mao. However, he could not be sure. After all, he had not seen Xiao Mao for a long time. Since the search was fruitless, Xiao Hua could only once again enter the Spirit Stone mine. After capturing another swordsman, Xiao Hua found the location of the captured cultivator. This was a rather large cave. In front of the cave, there were no swordsmen guarding it. There was only a long flying sword floating at the entrance of the cave. That flying sword slowly rotated at the entrance of the cave, faintly overflowing with sword light. Presumably, if a cultivator escaped from the cave, they would immediately be killed by this flying sword. Xiao Hua looked left and right to see that there was no one around. As if nothing had happened, he revealed himself in front of the cave entrance. Just as his figure appeared, the flying sword at the entrance of the cave immediately sensed him. It suddenly flashed, and a sword light rushed out from the flying sword, piercing towards Xiao Hua's throat. Oomph! A mere sword formation dares to show off its power in front of this Xiao? Xiao Hua coldly snorted, and with a universe in the sleeve, the sword light was immediately annihilated. Then, Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and very easily took the flying sword from the entrance of the cave. He casually threw it into the space. Xiao Hua was now proficient in the 7 stars Great Array, so this little protective sword formation was naturally not under his command. When Xiao Hua stepped into the cave, he walked along the mountain path for more than 1,000 feet. His eyes suddenly opened up, and it was actually 1,000 feet wide space. It was clearly an abandoned Spirit Stone mine. At this moment, there were hundreds of Dao sect cultivators lying, sitting, and standing in the space. Moreover, these hundreds of Dao sect disciples were divided into several groups. They were whispering softly, and there were even moaning sounds. Only a dozen or so disciples were sitting cross-legged, adjusting their breathing. When they saw someone enter, everyone stopped whispering, and only the moaning sounds continued. Imperial Thunder sect disciple? A sharp-eyed Xuanyin school disciple suddenly shouted, "Huh? Why did you come in? What's so strange about it?" This guy was also captured by the sword cultivators. A disciple at the side actually said with schadenfreude, "I naturally know that this Imperial Thunder sect disciple was captured. What I mean is, why is this Imperial Thunder sect disciple here?" That disciple explained. "Then you'll have to ask him." After that disciple finished speaking, he ignored him and said something to the people beside him. Everyone had the same thought, and the whispers rose again. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over, and he already understood that these Xuanyin school disciples' cultivation was sealed. Regardless of magic power or divine sense, they were unable to use it. Naturally, they did not know that they were not bound. However, Xiao Hua ignored them. His gaze was like lightning, and his footsteps were steady. As he walked, he looked around. After looking for a while, he still did not find any trace of Xiao Mao. At this moment, the bystanders also noticed that something was wrong. "Fellow Taoist from the Imperial Thunder sect, are you looking for someone?" A seemingly amiable disciple whispered. "And I—" Xiao Hua was about to answer when he heard a slightly surprised voice from a distant corner. "Xiao Hua, you're Imperial Thunder sect's Xiao Hua? Oh, there's an old friend here?" Xiao Hua was stunned. In Xuanyin school, other than Zhuqing Yuan and Xiao Mao, he did not know anyone else. Who could it be? However, that person limped out from the corner. Looking at the unfamiliar face, Xiao Hua was not sure if he really knew this person. Chapter 24:02. Fellow Taoist. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, "How do you know me?" Ha! That disciple stood there with difficulty and returned the greeting. "I, Zhang Xiaojiang, participated in the Taiqing sect's Feather Immortal Assembly with fellow Taoist Xiao. However, we were not in the same group and never met. Fellow Taoist Xiao fought Yin Jiechong in the assembly, which was also witnessed by me. So I have a deep impression of fellow Taoist Xiao." "Oh, I see." Xiao Hua nodded, looked at Zhang Xiaojiang, and said, "Since you're an old friend from the Feather Immortal Assembly, I naturally can't stand by and watch." As he spoke, Xiao Hua waved his hand, and Zhang Xiaojiang felt his meridians loosen, and his true essence began to flow again. "Oh, so fellow Taoist Xiao wasn't captured?" Zhang Xiaojiang was overjoyed. "When did I say I was captured?" Xiao Hua waved his hand, took out some healing pills from a space, looked at the nearby disciples, and said, "These pills are for fellow Taoist Zhang." "Great." Zhang Xiaojiang and the other storage bags were taken away by the sword cultivator. So how could they have healing pills? Xiao Hua's medicinal pills were a timely rain. Hearing Zhang Xiaojiang's cry, all the surrounding disciples quieted down, and their eyes flashed with surprise. Of course, Xuanyin School was a large sect after all, and the disciples didn't panic when they saw that there was a chance of survival. They all sat down quietly, waiting for Zhang Xiaojiang's rescue. Zhang Xiaojiang took the pills, slightly adjusted his breathing, and walked to the side of the Xuanyin School disciple. He hit this person with a spell, wanting to remove the sword cultivator's restriction. However, he tried several times, but it didn't work. He didn't know if it was because his magic power was insufficient or because the sword cultivator's restriction was strange. Xiao Hua frowned as he watched from the side. He also had the same plan, to let Zhang Xiaojiang save the Xuanyin School disciple himself, and he didn't need to do anything. "Fellow Taoist Xiao," Zhang Xiaojiang said awkwardly. "I asked fellow Taoist Xiao to help." And Xiao Hua didn't have anything to decline, but he still asked, "I came here to find a person. May I know which fellow Taoist has seen Xiao Mao?" "Xiao Mao?" Zhang Xiaojiang shook his head slightly. Clearly, he did not know Xiao Mao. "Senior brother Xiao." A disciple in the distance hurriedly raised his hand and said, "I know Xiao Mao. However, the battle was too chaotic, so I don't know where Xiao Mao is. I don't know if he escaped or... Is there anyone else who knows him?" Xiao Huafei asked. With a flick of his sleeve, he removed the restriction on that disciple. The next few disciples also said that they knew Xiao Mao, but none of them could tell where he was. What should we do? Xiao Hua frowned. Perhaps he really escaped? Fellow Daoist Xiao, what does Xiao Mao look like? Perhaps other disciples have seen it before? Zhang Xiaojiang saw that Xiao Hua was somewhat anxious, so he came up with an idea. This Xiao really doesn't know what Xiao Mao looks like right now. Xiao Hua laughed. When a disciple who knew Xiao Mao described his appearance, a tall and thin disciple immediately raised his hand and said, "I've seen this disciple before. How is he?" Xiao Hua immediately removed the restriction on that disciple and asked anxiously. He was restrained by an illusory sword cultivator and taken away. The disciple thought for a moment and said, "At that time, he was beside this disciple." There were also a few disciples who were taken away. They? Xiao Hua originally wanted to ask, where did they go? But as soon as the words left his mouth, he felt that something was wrong. How could these disciples know where the illusory sword cultivator went? Sure enough, the disciple smiled bitterly. This disciple was also restrained by the illusory sword cultivator. I don't know where they went. Thank you very much. Xiao Hua thought for a moment, looked at the hundreds of Shu and Yin school disciples' longing eyes, and said with a smile, "Wait a moment. It's not that this Xiao doesn't want to remove the restriction for you, but this place is too dangerous. If this Xiao helps you remove the restriction, this Xiao's magic power will be gone, and I won't even be able to protect myself." Zhang Xiaojiang was somewhat disappointed in his heart. Just as he was about to say something, Xiao Hua said again, "Just like before, stay here obediently. In less than an hour, there will naturally be someone who will take you away." With that, Xiao Hua turned around and was about to leave, but as if he thought of something, he turned around and said a few words to Zhang Xiaojiang. Zhang Xiaojiang's eyes flashed with extraordinary splendor, and then he nodded slightly. With a clap of his hand, he took out a jade slip and handed it to Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua took it and didn't stay any longer, floating away from the cave. Senior brother Zhang. After Xiao Hua left, the disciple familiar with Zhang Xiaojiang couldn't help but ask, "This Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect, where did he come from? How could he come to my Shu and Yin school's Spirit Stone vein? How could he easily break the sword formation of a sword cultivator? How could he directly come to this cave?" Zhang Xiaojiang didn't wait for the disciple to finish speaking and said with a bitter smile, "This brother also doesn't know. I only saw him at the Taiching sect's Feather Immortal assembly dozens of years ago, and we haven't seen each other since then. If it wasn't for the fact that his face didn't change, I wouldn't have been able to recognize him." Oh my, so he participated in the Feather Immortal assembly before. The disciple nodded. No wonder he could so easily. Speaking of this, the disciple looked Zhang Xiaojiang up and down and asked curiously, "Senior brother Zhang, what's this Xiao Hua's cultivation level? Since he participated in the Feather Immortal assembly with you, his cultivation level should be similar to yours. How could he easily enter this place?" The peak of the initial stage of the Foundation establishment realm. Zhang Xiaojiang had already recovered his cultivation level, so it was very easy for him to sense Xiao Hua's concealed cultivation level. He answered without hesitation. Moreover, Xiao Hua was only at the 11th layer of the Qi refining realm during the Feather Immortal assembly. Strange, the disciple was even more confused. Senior brother Zhang couldn't break the sword cultivator's restriction, but he could so easily break it. Then, the disciple looked elsewhere. Those places were naturally the places where the disciples whose restrictions had been broken by Xiao Hua tried to break the restriction for others. As for the jade slip that Zhang Xiaojiang gave Xiao Hua, no one asked much about it. Everyone thought that it was the price Xiao Hua had to pay for saving Zhang Xiaojiang, right? Putting aside the Imperial Thunder Sect's disciples who were guessing Xiao Hua's mysteriousness, Xiao Hua himself came out of the cave and took out the flying sword again. He casually threw it on top of the cave. He didn't know how to set up a sword formation, but who didn't know how to do it? Xiao Hua didn't believe that a sword cultivator who was currently busy would come here to check on the sword formation. Besides, he wouldn't give a sword cultivator the time to do so. After capturing a bright sword swordsman and asking about the location of the illusory sword swordsman who stayed behind, Xiaohua flew toward the depths of the spirit stone mine. Chapter 2403. In a brightly lit cave dwelling, Guan Peng was lazily sitting on a jade chair covered in spirit beast fur. His left hand was stretched out, and his 5 fingers occasionally flicked as if he was plucking the strings of zither. A sparkling and translucent jade cup floated above his left hand. As Guan Peng's fingers moved slightly, the jade cup rose and fell. The jade cup was filled with blood-red liquid. As the jade cup rose and fell, several drops of liquid splashed out. Guan Peng pursed his lips, and several drops of liquid flew into his mouth. Guan Peng narrowed his eyes as if he was enjoying the taste of the blood-red liquid. After a long while, he opened his eyes and seemed to be talking to himself in his sleep. The taste of this blood crystal is truly ecstasy. These Tao sect cultivators really know how to enjoy themselves. Yes, wouldn't it be very lonely if one didn't have this kind of spirit wine to pass the time during one's dull cultivation? It's a pity that the warriors of my sword domain have to fight against soul cultivators every day to ensure the safety of our sword domain. Why do you Tao sect cultivators have to sit back and enjoy the credit of us swordsmen? After I take down this spirit stone vein, I will replace Yin cult in managing the spirit stone vein. This blood crystal, TSK, I will have to taste it more in the future. Guan Peng was very pleased with himself. Although no one was listening to him, he was still talking. His faint voice drifted within the cave dwelling, sweeping past the jade table, the thick crystal pillars, and landing on the luxurious decorations within the cave dwelling. Guan Peng could not help but feel pleased with himself. The sword cultivators had been drooling over the Tao sect's spirit stone vein for a long time. However, during the fight for the spirit stone vein several years ago, the sword cultivators did not gain much of an advantage. Although they controlled a few spirit stone veins, most of them were similar to the spirit stone vein at Jinquan Mountain and were close to being abandoned. The sword cultivators also realized that while they were beating around the bush to lure the snake out of its hole, the Tao sect cultivators were also taking advantage of the situation and playing hard to get. The Tao sect cultivators were not working behind closed doors like they had imagined. On the other hand, Guan Peng's failing sword manor had received a piece of news. Yin cult had the northernmost spirit stone vein in the Gale Snowfield. Of course, this news had not been confirmed. Because the Gale Snowfield was originally a part of the sword domain, Tao sect cultivators rarely came here. It was extremely inconvenient for a Yin cult to mine spirit stones here and exposed. Therefore, the failing sword manor sent Guan Peng to investigate this matter and see if the news was true or false. They also gave Guan Peng several hundred disciples. Of course, among these several hundred disciples, there were pregnant swords and also unsheathed swords. It was better than nothing. Failing Sword Manor did not take this matter seriously, but Guan Peng did not think so. He wanted to stand out in the sword battle. Using this opportunity, he not only joined forces with his good friend Liao Changkong from the Flying Feather sect, but also got to know Yu Ming from the Quilted Mountain sect and Feng Buping from the Herd of Macaw's Valley. They had planned for a long time and made use of Yin cult's golden core cultivator Pang Chongtian's desire to make a big contribution to the Gale Snowfield to set up an ambush to lure the Tao sect cultivators. Of course, luring Pang Chongtian was only a bait. Guan Peng's real goal was to let Pang Chongtian lead them to Yin cult's spirit stone vein and find its location. They had hidden thousands of swordsmen near the Gale Snowfield, and these swordsmen were the main force attacking Yin cult's spirit stone vein. Damn it, the heavens are really helping me, allowing me to make a big contribution. Thinking of this, Guan Peng still had a smile on his face. If there were only the 4 of us illusory swordsmen, this Yin cult's formation would not be easy to break. Who would have thought that someone would come to help at the crucial moment? It's a pity that Pang Chongtian realized his mistake in the end and used his death to activate a secret technique to cover Jiang Shan and the rest escape. I was ambushed by that bastard, otherwise I would have followed them. Just as Guan Peng was feeling proud, he suddenly sensed something and waved his hand. A red plum blossom bloomed from his hand and rushed through the jade cup in the air. The blood-red spirit wine in the jade cup spilled onto the red plum blossom. The drops of juice were like droplets of blood. Ha ha ha, you can actually detect my tracks. Your cultivation is really not bad. Laughing, Xiao Hua's figure appeared on the other side of the cave. Xiao Hua's figure appeared, and with a wave of his hand, he took out the Yang Leaf fan. With a wave of his magic power, a thumb-sized fire snake flew out from the Yang Leaf fan and pounced on the red plum blossom. Sizzle, with a series of sounds, the fire snake wrapped around the red plum blossom. Like the passion of a rainy night, the fire snake excitedly killed the delicate red plum blossom. Oh, you're not that Seven Skills sect. No, you're a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. Seeing Xiao Hua's young face, Guan Peng's expression suddenly changed. Why are you here? Hee. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked around. He smiled and said, Is it very important for me to be here? It seems your life is more important than my goal, right? Ha ha, Guan Peng laughed loudly. A Dao sect disciple whose cultivation is not even at the middle stage of foundation establishment dares to threaten me, an illusory swordsman. If this were to spread, wouldn't it be the biggest joke in the world? Yes. Xiao Hua took a step forward and sat down on a jade chair. He rubbed his nose and said with a smile, If an illusory swordsman were to fall at the hands of an early-stage foundation establishment cultivator, how big of a joke would that be? Humph. Guan Peng clapped his hand, and the red plum blossom sword appeared in his hand. The red plum blossom on the withered branch bloomed. If I were you, I wouldn't try it so easily. Xiao Hua coldly looked at the red plum sword without the slightest fear. This Xiao wants to make a deal with you with great sincerity. If you insist on teasing this Xiao's bottom line, this Xiao doesn't believe that a seriously injured illusory swordsman can escape from this Xiao's hands. You talk too much. How could Guan Peng take Xiao Hua's words to heart? With a wave of his hand, the red plum blossom sword appeared. Red plum blossoms the size of a fist flashed with a sword intent that could kill everything in winter. They swarmed toward Xiao Hua like a swarm of bees. Wherever the red plum blossoms passed, traces of coldness were drawn in, causing the water element's spiritual energy in the air to flicker with a faint light of ice. Hiss, sure enough, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He hastily flew up from the jade chair and waved his sun leaf fan again. A fist-sized fireball flew out from the sun leaf fan like the rising sun and rushed into the air. The flames on the fireball burned fiercely, illuminating the entire cave and all the red plum blossoms. Explode, Xiao Hua coldly shouted. The fireball exploded with a loud bang. Countless tiny flame fragments fluttered like fireflies and rushed toward the red plum blossoms. Swish, swish, a series of burning sounds could be heard. Guan Peng's red plum blossom flying sword was completely enveloped in flames. Whenever the flame threads approached the red plum blossoms, an irresistible heat wave would immediately break the ice of the red plum blossoms. The red plum blossoms were gradually annihilated by the fierce sword light in the cave. Similarly, the sparks also slowly disappeared. You're just a junior who relies on magic treasures. Seeing the power of Xiao Hua's sun leaf fan, Guan Peng forcibly suppressed the boiling sword origin in his body. He opened his mouth, and a small dark red sword whistled toward Xiao Hua. As the small sword flew out, a slight blush appeared on Guan Peng's face. Moreover, the sword light around his body also flickered frequently. Xiao Hua was also somewhat flustered. He waved his sun leaf fan with all his might. Another fireball that was slightly smaller than the previous one flew out and met the small sword. The small sword was very agile. It shuttled back and forth between several zhong, as if it was dodging the fireball. However, the fireball was not inferior. It blocked the small sword and prevented it from passing through. Swish! The small sword saw that it could not avoid it, and stabbed toward the fireball. The fireball suddenly lit up and was immediately annihilated. The small sword actually pierced through the fireball and stabbed toward Xiao Hua's face with incomparable speed. Tisk. Xiao Hua's face was a little panicked, but he still clicked his tongue. His figure flashed quickly, and in an instant, he dodged the flying sword. Then, he waved his Yang Yi fan again, and a fire net covered the entire small sword. Seeing Xiao Hua's fast flying technique, Guanpeng suddenly thought a name and said with some astonishment, You're that terrifying phoenix from the Imperial Thunder Sect? Not bad, it's really me. Xiao Hua's figure floated down and looked at Guanpeng with interest. His face was immensely proud. Since you know it's me, you still dare to provoke me? However, since you've already made your move, don't blame me for being ruthless. As he spoke, he raised his Sun Li fan again and waved it toward Guanpeng. Wait, at this moment, Guanpeng suddenly raised his hand and said, Terrifying Phoenix, you said you wanted to make a deal with this old man. I wonder what it is. What? Are you afraid? Xiao Hua's face showed a trace of pride. The waving of his Sun Li fan stopped, and the brilliance on it also slowly extinguished. Afraid? Ha ha ha! Guanpeng laughed loudly. You're only a middle-stage foundation establishment cultivator. Even if you have some secret technique, can you resist this old man's illusory sword technique? You're called Terrifying Phoenix, but you're just a shining swordsman. That's the name of a swordsman. To be honest, in this old man's eyes, it's just a joke. Xiao Hua's face alternated between red and green, as if he was very embarrassed. He said with a bit of shame and anger, Since that's the case, this Xiao is too lazy to make any deal with you. Come, this Xiao wants to see who will die here today. As he spoke, he waved his Sun Li fan again. Little friend Xiao, don't be impatient. Guanpeng saw Xiao Hua's shame and anger and hurriedly waved his hand. However, he was secretly amused and said to himself, This little cultivator fishing for fame. If you're not afraid, then make your move. Xiao Hua said coldly and looked again at the small sword trapped in the fire net. Ha ha! Guanpeng laughed and casually sat down. He resumed his previous lazy appearance and methodically poured a cup of blood crystal. He took a sip and said, Little friend Xiao, have you drunk this blood crystal before? This? Xiao Hua was stunned and didn't understand Guanpeng's meaning. After a while, he replied, This Xiao doesn't like spiritual wine. I don't know what blood crystal is. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.